Okay, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and this one is with Vu, famous Dutch dueler. Now, when I say that, most people to this day still think in the back of their mind, painkiller dueler, because even though you absolutely have played as a pro, as a semi-pro, in Quake Live, now in Quake Champions, you played, obviously, I mean, how you define pro and semi-pro, I'm meaning literally, got paid, went to the big tournaments, but you did obviously play in past versions. But let's start before that, because one of the aspects that a lot of people won't realize, but when I say this, it will make a lot of sense, is that the world really got to know Vu from CPMA, which is the pro mod of Quake 3 Arena, which basically, without going into the whole history of that, it took Quake 3, which a lot of people, funnily enough, people will forget this, but when Quake 3 came out, it was the game that was supposed to unite Quake 2 and Quake World fans. And what happened was, it did, because Quake World and Quake 2 fans said, we are united in hating this game. And so either they played the vanilla Quake 3 because it was, either they were a pro player, or they just actually liked it, or some of them said, why don't we take elements of those other games, combine them into a mod, and the naive dream at the time was that would one day become the pro mod. Now, it obviously didn't, except in name, but as a result, instead what happened was you developed this very weird, very niche community of people who did just want to play that specific type of Quake, and actually didn't mind that it wasn't the competitive, like esports type version where all the money was. They just played it because they liked it. Now, as far as I know, this is where you come from. Is there any more to the background that we need to know than that?
I actually come from Quake 2. So
Okay.
back in 98 or 99, I started playing Quake 2. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Lithium mod in Quake 2.
Yes.
Yeah, it actually had bunny hopping, which as a 13, 14-year-old, I had no idea what bunny hopping was, obviously. So I played that mod. It had like a hook and runes, and I think I played that mod for like a year and a half before I ventured out into deathmatch, duel, TDM, and etc. But shortly after that, I was playing Quake 3 at a LAN, and apparently they were playing with a rule set in OSP, Pro Mode 1.
Yeah.
And then things got off from there. I found out what CPMA was, and back then, like you said, like no one. I was 15, 16. No, I didn't care about money,
Sure.
fame, whatever. Like no one did. This was 2001, 2002. So 2003. I don't know. It's been a while, but yeah, you played the games that were fun, not the games that were big in money. And this game, for me at the time, CPMA was fairly active. So I could always find a match, pick up, or whatever. So yeah, I started with Quake 2, but you're right in saying that I got my initial fame in Quake 3 CPMA.
Right. Even though, as you've just said there, it was a fun game. You weren't picking the game based on, like, will I become a pro? I mean, actually, no one really was generally back then. So is it that you just preferred CPMA over vanilla Quake? Or did you actually, because I know obviously Quake Live was kind of like Quake 3 later on that you played as a pro, semi-pro. Did you actually like normal Quake 3?
I just enjoyed whenever I played OSP, which was the competitive mode for Quake 3. I always preferred the rule set Pro Mode 1. So naturally, I enjoyed Pro Mode way more than Quake 3, and which is funny because I started out with Quake 2, and Quake 3 Vanilla is much more like Quake 2 than CPMA is. So in that sense,
yes,
maybe I started out with the wrong game. Maybe I should have started with Quake World after all.
Okay.
And things
if you'd have known about it as a young boy, perhaps, right?
Yeah. If my math teacher actually gave me a copy of Quake 2 back in the day, if he gave me a copy of Quake World, things might have been different. But yeah, no, I definitely preferred CPMA or Pro Mode over vanilla Quake 3.
Well, shout out to that math teacher for being so subversive and either making your life or ruining it. Well, it's all about perspective and what year we decide that from, I guess.
Depends how you look at it, yeah.
Here's my question then. So as I kind of set it up there, that wasn't just all flavor text, The whole point of the pro mode community was either they were people like you're saying here where you just liked the game, or they were almost people who were like, we don't care if this is ever an esport. And so unfortunately, it became this little niche, which was cool in its own right. But it did seem as though there's never any way this is going to connect to pro esports because these people, it's a bit like people who play Quake World now. Like, they'll never compromise. That's why they play Quake World now. They don't care about the pro scene, you know, and because of that, they'll just be playing Quake World forever. So the bizarre area that had to exist for you to sort of transition to being a pro in esports was we had this game come out called Painkiller. And funnily enough, while yes, it's obviously very simplistic to imply Painkiller is like CPMA, there are definitely qualities about it that are a lot more like CPMA than, for example, vanilla Quake. You know, obviously it has movement that is, I mean, it's a lot easier, but somewhat similar to bunny hopping. It's very fast paced. You play around teleporters, etc. You know, there's a lot of factors that are similar enough. So here's the weird thing, though. I know there were some tournaments. A lot of people are not aware of this, actually. A lot of people naively think Painkiller became an esports game with the CPL World Tour in 2005. They don't realize it had already been tested out the year before because we had ESWC and we actually had the CPL. It's just that they were like secondary and third games there. You know, Counter-Strike was still the king at the time. So how did you come straight over to Painkiller? Like, was it the fact that it had shared qualities and therefore it was easy to pick up? Why Painkiller? Especially as I set up the context, you know, you're in this little world of just playing for fun in pro mode.
So basically, early 2004, I think CPMA, I think, had seen its time. Like, it was kind of declining a bit. I picked up, and I was bored with the game. I picked up UT 2004. Not many people know this. I played UT 2K4 for like 2-3 months. I played a lot of TDM and some Duel, which was fun at the time. But I knew it wasn't my kind of game because it's just very slow and slow weapon switch, and it's just not Quake. And then Painkiller, which was heavily based upon Quake World, and thus also CPMA. I figured, you know, if I get an early start in a game, Quake 3 I was late, Quake 2 I was late, CPMA I was actually quite late compared to the other top players at the time. I figured if I start a game early enough, I could become, you know, a good player in the game. So Painkiller, I definitely from the very first day, I started out with the intention of becoming good.
Okay. So when they had those tournaments in 2004, interestingly enough, I mean, this is obviously quite a weird little detail when you consider what their context later became, but actually Fatality was already playing this game. He was playing it in 2004 and competing because actually that was basically, those were those couple of years in his career where it's quite famous that because he had such an aptitude for picking up a game and he obviously had a ridiculous work ethic to practice, he quite intelligently actually kind of just would pick whatever the new FPS game was that had a big duel tournament, and he would start practicing for it. And people remember he played UT briefly for a year and a half or so. Then he did the Alien versus Predator. And so initially it seemed to me, cynically from the outside, like until the World Tour, I get the sense he did this in Painkiller as well. But you won all the early tournaments in 2004. So what was the actual scene like? Like what was it? Obviously you got to play people like Fatality. What was the pre-CPL World Tour Painkiller scene like?
It was back then everyone still used IRC, and you had to look for duels, and you had to be in the right channels and hoping the servers had the right mods installed. I remember there were some online tournaments that I won. I think the very first online tournament in Painkiller was PK Euro Online. I played Dietz in the final. I won 2-0, and after winning that tournament, thanks to winning that tournament, I got an invite for ESWC. I believe the game was still fairly new, so they were still experimenting with gameplay and patches, and the game you know, you had Stalam playing the game, who brought a very different style to Painkiller than I did. Stalam was very slow and methodical, and whereas me, I was just running around using Painkiller's mechanics to its fullest. But sure. Yeah, ESWC 2004 was my very first event ever that I ever attended. 1 year prior to that, you had ESWC 2003, where I saw pros like 04, Cooler, all these players play, and that event was the first one that I watched on GTV. And then in 04, I actually went to one of those events, and seeing 04 in person for the first time, or Cooler or CZM, I was like, whoa, these guys, I watched them a year ago, and now I actually get to see them in person. For me, I still remember that as quite a surreal experience, because I was literally a nobody back then. I wasn't famous in Quake or Unreal. Sure, I was famous in CPMA, but like you said, it's very small niche community, so
Yes.
no one truly outside that community cared for me at all. And then the Painkiller events happened. You had ESWC and CPL Summer 2004, which I ended up winning both. Not without trouble, I have to say. I was very close losing the ESWC 2004 second group stage. I think one map was like I won with 1 or 2 frag difference in the last 30 seconds, where I was running away for my life. If I had lost that map, I would have been out of the tournament.
Oh, okay.
So, CPL Summer, I lost to Fatality in the winner bracket final, then came back, beat Stalam in the lower bracket final, and then I beat Fatality twice in the winner bracket final. Also, that was best of 1. I'm really, really glad tournaments are not best of 1 maps anymore, because it feels more random to me. But the scene for Painkiller in the early days was the game is super new. Everyone's playing it a lot. We had boot camps before tournaments. Everyone was active, playing a lot. And actually, after the CPL Summer 2004, we had like a few months of no one playing the game, because everyone thought, this is it. Painkiller is done. Painkiller is done. It's not going to be played again. Doom 3 is going to be the CPL World Tour game.
Yes.
And I vividly remember listening to, I think it was TSN and CPL's.
Yes, they did an interview with Angel Munoz.
Yes,
right?
and I think it was like 3 a.m. in the morning, 2 a.m. in the morning. I was watching it where I was going to school, pursuing my degree. I was watching it 2, 3 a.m. and then Angel Munoz said the famous words, "It's going to be Painkiller," and I was like, "Oh man, this is awesome," because I had won the 2 events and I knew that there was a $1 million world tour. So everyone started playing the game again, and the game had a new patch coming in where people found out new tricks. So there was a shotgun that could slow down a player. Painkiller is very fast. So you can run around the map at pretty much light speed. Unless your opponent had a shotgun, and using that shotgun, you could slow your opponent down. So in Europe, most people knew about it. But I was always hoping that in the US, they didn't know about it as much, because there was no GTV, there was no Twitch or PKTV or whatever. So games weren't really casted. You had your online tournaments, and they watched. Back then, people didn't really watch. There was no YouTube, I don't think. It's a long time ago. I don't think there was YouTube.
No, there wasn't.
No, there wasn't. No, but people
you had
back
to actually
then
download the video of the game or watch it live, basically.
and then sync with the radio of TSN or ITG or whatever was famous at the time. But yeah, I was hoping that in the US no one knew about the shotgun. So back then, you still had these little tricks that your community knew about, but you were hoping that the other community, EU and US, didn't know about. So that was early days for Painkiller, and unfortunately, at the US event, the CPL Winter 2004, everyone knew about it anyway. So it was a moot point, but still, yeah. Early days of Painkiller was awesome, and the patch felt good, the game felt good, everyone was super active, and I have a lot of good memories from that time period.
So one thing I want to ask, actually, you've touched on it a little bit there, is that a lot of people don't know that detail as well. That basically, behind the scenes, everyone knew, okay, there's the CPL World Tour coming along, and it's going to be like a lot of money spread out over a lot of tournaments. It's going to be like kind of like the ATP in tennis or the golf version, etc. So when this came along, though, the discussion was, which will it be? And as you say, since Doom 3 had just come out, and obviously, I mean, first of all, it's an id Software game, and so obviously the history that game has in esports, that it's ridiculous. So a lot of people, especially the Quakers, thought, right, it's probably going to be Doom 3. And then Painkiller was already like floated, like that's like maybe an option. But at the time, this is actually a key kind of evolution in esports that people won't necessarily pin to Painkiller. But one of the reasons, as far as I know, behind the scenes, why the CPL did take on Painkiller instead is because at that time, yes, Doom 3 was a big game, and id Software is a big company in esports, but they were like a big company who just made a game that happened to be used in esports. Whereas what I remember was the developer of Painkiller basically like was in theory like more receptive to the idea that like, you know, we will like mod this to be more of an esports game and we'll work with it. Now, whether any of that happened, we could obviously debate all that, and people can make their complaints, but you can see that this is kind of actually an evolution of what happened in esports, because we know in the modern day, you only get your game into the big esports tournaments if you like literally work with the developer, the tournament organizer rather, and you give them money or you help them adjust the game, give them spectator tools. So when it was announced, okay, like you said, okay, obviously it was great for you anyway, because you were already playing Painkiller, you were already the best player. But here's the question. If it had been Doom 3, would you have tried Doom 3? Would you have attempted to compete in that, do you think?
Most likely not, because I had played some Doom 3 at the time, and it was just so slow, so boring. It was not a game for me. I could not get into it. I played it for a few hours after its release. I did not like it at all, and it also did not suit my game style. You know, it's just like CS doesn't suit my game style. It's super slow. It's not what I excel at. So yes, I could be a good top 10, top 20 player, but is that really what I want? No, it's not. So I probably wouldn't have played it if it was Doom 3.
Okay, so in Painkiller, I'll just give people the broad strokes as we go into these things, okay? So in the stops, there were, I think it was 9 tour stops, and then there was the finals. I think that's the way it was. So overall 10 events, but obviously the 10th one is like the big grand final.
Yeah,
you know?
I think it should have been 10 events, and then the 11th one should have been the grand final, but one of them got cancelled.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
I think it might have been like Brazil or something. No, it wasn't Brazil.
Brazil was there.
Played.
Yeah.
There was one, I think you're correct. I think one got cancelled, you're right.
I think Germany.
Could be. Okay, so when we had these stops, right, so let's first of all put the big broad strokes out there. Over these 10 stops, the worst you ever placed was 3rd, and that happened once. Otherwise, you either won the stop, so that happened like half the time, 5 times, or you placed 2nd in, well, presumably 4 of the others. So you were always either the champion or very competitive for it. Could you have known going in, based on the success before, like, even though, yes, there's more people going to try for this game and the money, in theory, can attract more people, etc., did you understand at the beginning that you were poised to potentially be this dominant?
Not really, because, the first 2 events had very few people playing compared to the World Tour. Like CPL Winter 2004, you had all these new players coming in. You had all these Quake 3 players coming, like ZYZ, Daler,
yes,
Lexer, a bunch of other famous Quake 3 players started trying out Painkiller, and they were poised to be, better Painkiller players than me or Fatality even. Sure. Because, how can a no-name such as me come in and play a game and be the champion? So reading those comments, you start you might start believing these some things that people say. So I thought to myself, I'll probably be good, but as dominant as I was, no, probably not. But yeah, the CPL Winter happened, I won it, and then Turkey happened, and I kept winning, and then I realized, this is probably going to be my year. I'm either going to be 1st or 2nd most of the times.
Okay, so right away, this will already just shows that it's a thorough interview, right? Because right away I've set up what amazing success. Like, you could talk for an entire interview just about the success. But here's a question right off the bat. So if someone has every tournament their top 3, and in fact every tournament but one they're in the top 2, they're either going to win or someone narrowly beats them, right? Most people would think this person that must be their life, the game. That was the only practicing that game. They must never give up because, think about it. If someone told you, oh, you're the best player and next month there's another tournament where you could win another 15,000, 10,000, whatever, people would think you'd be insanely dedicated, right? From what I remember, Vu, you were one of the people, believe it or not, on this tour who had wavering motivation, right? Some of them you were very motivated, you were practicing for. Some of them, even when you're winning off placing 2nd, some of them, it took its toll, right? It's hard to practice for 10 events over a whole year. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, it's very tough. The problem with the World Tour version of the game was 1.64 was the netcode wasn't as good as Painkiller version in 2004. So playing online was fairly rough, to be fair. So Luckily, I had Galasak as a. He lived in my house back in from January throughout April or May. So he lived at my house for 3 or 4 months, and yeah, we played Painkiller on LAN. Which on LAN it felt amazing. You know, the game was super smooth on LAN. Everything felt fluid and fine and perfect. Online, not so much. You know, shotgun didn't work as well, and shotgun was like one of the most important weapons. So practicing the game day in, day out, you know, it's a chore, man. If it's a new game, then yes, it's fun. You're finding out new stuff. But after 6 months of playing the same game, and every day in, day out, you're playing the same game, the same maps, the same opponents, the same tactics, the same red armor or gold armor, whatever, it just becomes a chore. So this was already in January, February, where I had this feeling of not having motivation to play. So a lot of these, like after an event, I probably didn't play Painkiller for about a week, and there was one event a month on average. So yes. You know, I would ramp down my practice after an event and then would ramp it up like a week before an event. But in general, I was just playing to maintain my skill level, and then right before an event, I would play 2 to 4 or 5 hours a day. And just try to get as good as possible. For example, in the Spain tournament, I noticed there was a new map and Spain was the second World Tour stop, or the third, depending on how you look at it. Yes. Yeah, it was the second, but there was like a failed CPL Turkey, yes. which they dubbed CPL Turkey 0.5, yes. Which actually that was a really, really fun event. It was we did it in a Sheraton hotel somewhere in Istanbul, okay. And it was really like underground. And since the tournament wasn't structured as well, you got to hang out with a lot of players. It was just a really cool event, and probably one of the most fun events I've experienced. But anyway, back to CPL Spain. There was a new map, and like a few days before the event, I barely even knew the spawn points. So yeah, yes, there was a lot of money involved, but also I also felt that most players had reached their ceiling, and the game's patch was basically 1.64 for the remainder of the year. So I also felt that the players had hit their ceiling. So is there any point on playing 4 hours a day for an entire year? Yes, the money is good, but it just wasn't fun for me, basically, after playing the game so much. So excuse me. So after an event, I'd stop playing. Right before an event, I would ramp it up, and I had some tournament losses, but I'm not going to say that those losses were because of me not playing the game as much. But yeah, after I would lose an event, I definitely get some extra motivation to play more and get more success. But in general, it's hard to stay motivated to keep playing a lot when you're constantly winning, because winning. Yeah, I don't know why. I just lost motivation, even though when I was winning, and it's easier to get motivation to reach the top than to get motivation to maintain your position at the top, so to say, because you become less hungry when you're winning. If that makes sense.
Sure. So one of the first noticeable losses you had was one where it's funny how when you actually were there and you watched something chronologically, you know, your reaction to something will be so different to how you think years later. So, for example, you've already referenced Stellam, and famously he beat you in the Spain final, which was, as you're saying, technically the third event, but it was actually the second event for the official World Tour. And here's the bizarre thing. When he beat you, obviously then people hoped, right, oh, it's going to be a great rivalry, it's going to be back and forth. Sadly, that was pretty much, you know, he had like that one amazing event, and then he kind of didn't do much for the rest of the tour. What do you think was how do you analyze this outcome where, first of all, he was able to beat you? Like, what do you think factored into that? And then why do you think he kind of tapered off?
If I remember correctly, CPL Spain had patch 1.62, which the rocket jumping wasn't as smooth. So you had 1.61 for Turkey. Then next month they had 1.62, where the rocket jumping wasn't as fast. So you would go full speed and you would rocket jump and you would really slow down. So the game was a lot slower at that tournament than it was at other events. So that might have been a factor. Other than that, man, the guy just played out of his mind. I don't know what happened, what came over me. I remember going into the winner bracket final fairly confident, and I lost. And not to Fatality, not to ZYZ, to Stellam out of nowhere. It was super weird. Then I think I beat CYZ or maybe Sturmy in the lower bracket final. I had to play Stellam again. I think I won the first match of the DE final 2-1, and then the next two maps I didn't have a chance at all. He beat me again, 2-0 in our final match of the event, and so but he came out of nowhere. It was very weird losing to him, but he was my friend. You know, a lot of the Painkiller or the World Tour players were close friends, especially the SK guys at the time, ZYZ, Neok, and Selam, and the Fnatic guys. They were close friends. We would always boot camp either in the Netherlands or in Germany. So losing to him, it didn't really bother me because he was a great friend, and I was happy for him that he won a tournament. But after that, man, he got top 8, top 12, maybe top 6, but he never really achieved what he achieved in Spain, which was very surprising to me because he really was a great player. But I don't know, he just fell off, and maybe he lost motivation as well. Maybe he got a girlfriend. I don't really know the specifics of what happened to his decline, so to say. But yeah, he never achieved what he achieved in Spain.
Because as I said, you know, people would have thought, right, cool, it's going to be Stellam who's the guy who kind of battles you. But in fact, what we found out was it was the big name himself. It was Fatality, because by the time the summer arrived, by the time the third event arrived, he was making to the finals, and then basically, except for the odd little weird one like CPL Chile, it's basically the two of you from there on out, right? Every event, you know, you'd both get deep, and it was more about when do you play each other, who wins the upper bracket one, who wins the lower bracket one. It became a real rivalry, right?
Yeah. I remember in Spain, Fatality got 6th. He lost to Strider, who was also a no-name. Like, no one really knew Strider back then. He was super talented. But he lost to Fatality. Fatality lost to Strider and got 6th. I remember at that event, John asked me about my mouse settings and what mouse I use.
Yes.
And I gave everything to him. I said, here, this is the mouse, the Microsoft Intelli Explorer. These are my mouse settings, no mouse Excel. You know, this is how it plays. And he tried it out. And I guess he tried my mouse settings, and he thought, you know, maybe Vu does it. Vu uses this kind of setup. So if I start using a setup like this, it'll work for me. And yeah, sure enough, the next event, he gets to was it the winner bracket final? No, he loses to Sturmy in the quarterfinals, but then makes it to the winner bracket final anyway. And ever since that tournament, it was just either me first or him first. But yeah, we would always play each other in either the winner bracket final or the grand final. We'd always play each other ever since that little tiny thing in Spain where I handed over him, you know, here's my secret setup, which it wasn't really secret at the time, you know, or whatever. But he started adapting. He used the mouse that I was using. He used no Excel, and ever since then he got good. He got really good suddenly. I guess he stopped focusing time on his company so much, and I guess losing to me and Strider and just not being a top 3 player in Painkiller really pissed him off. So he really started focusing on Painkiller full stop.
Because for context, for people who don't know, famously especially in the Quake games, Fatality was a player who used what is actually a very Quake-style setup, where what you do is you have a medium to high accel, so you can do like a 180 super well, but you have like a lowish sense, so you can LG very well, and you can hit rails well. So basically, the downside of that I've noticed in a lot of games is that particular setup doesn't seem as favorable to games that require a lot of movement. And so I believe he said that was one of the factors, because he said before, I've done an interview with him as well, he said something along the lines of, like, he never could understand how you'd always get away. Like, even if he sort of trapped you or a fight was going his way, you'd just sort of zoom off and he'd be like, well, how does he do it, you know? So does that line up with what you think the change was when he sort of adapted? Because obviously part of this is not just the mouse, you know, it's probably how he conceives of the game. How am I going to play the game? How's the opponent going to play the game? It's clearly it had some kind of an effect upon him.
Yeah, I think he just started thinking about the game differently. I think he just played a faster kind of game. I think he basically just copied me, is what he did. Obviously, I was at the time the best player in the world, except for losing to Stellam. But I think he just copied my style, and he looked at demos and videos, and he copied how I played, which was always be on the move. You're always on the move. You never stand still, because if you stand still, you're very easy to hit, and it's harder to hit your enemy. So it's always best to just be on the move, time gold and mega, and just be on the move and get favorable positions. I guess he just copied that and learned from me, basically.
When Fatality started to get good, obviously because he'd started off weak in the World Tour, as you referenced, like not terrible, certainly
not weak.
He wasn't going to win the tournament, put it that way. No. Okay, like so, because he then elevated and became like the true contender for you and the rival that could win against events or come second. A lot of people obviously put that down to Fatality's most famous qualities, the one he's marketed himself on. It seems to have a lot to it, which is that he's very good at applying himself. Like, he is the person who will just grind X amount of hours, But one of the interesting details I remember about what he did on the World Tour was where he actually brought along that guy. I think wasn't his name like Zen or something? It was a guy that he brought with him.
Brian
who wasn't
Reppeton.
In any context a top player. Like, this guy never had a top placing at one of these tournaments, but his job was be Fatality's practice partner. And Fatality in all of his duel games has always had a very interesting approach where he'll first of all have a few people he practices with specifically. And then he crucially, the reason why it doesn't matter that they're usually worse players is because he just wants them to keep everything secret. So he can practice and test things out and figure things out, but it never gets out there. He doesn't go and practice with his main rival and then have that guy pick up things from him. In general, he wants to kind of make it like a black box environment of how you practice. Mm-hmm. Now, what I wanted to ask about this was, did you actually ever practice Fatality? Because another detail I know people don't know about the World Tour is because, as you said, the netcode was bad and very few people who weren't playing on the tour actually played the game for fun. Practice was very weird for this game compared to any other game I know of, because it actually was very, like, we call it cliquish in English, You'd have a group of these 3 or 4 people who practice with each other, and then you have this other group who practice with each other. And actually, if you look at the results, you can sort of tell some of the people who practice together. What was it like in that respect, And was Fatality in this sense, was he kind of a guy you could only see in the matches, the officials?
Yeah, basically, like we both mentioned, the netcode was not great. So LAN play was really the best way to get practice. So right before an event, I would go either to Germany, to Stalam's house, or Stalam and the SK people would go to my house in the Netherlands, and we'd play on LAN. So we'd have these 4, 5, 6 people to play with on LAN. But online, no one really played online, except the tour players sometimes. But yeah, practicing this game was really difficult because the netcode wasn't good and connections weren't as good back then. So I never ever played against Fatality in a practice match ever. Only official matches. So in fact, I don't think I played. It's been a long time, so I don't really think I played any practice matches against non-Fnatic or non-SK players at those events.
Oh, okay.
So practice, in general, practicing at an event back then was fairly scarce. Like, there was not a lot of time to practice,
and
really.
Fnatic was just you and Strider, or was there someone else?
Me, Strider, and Galasat.
Galasat.
And then Gopher 2 for one event, I think. And then the
very
SK,
early on.
Yeah, SK guys were Stellam, ZYZ, and Neok very early on. And yes. Neok and Gopher basically both quit.
Okay. So then that's obviously an interesting topic to ask then. So when Fatality comes up and he's now challenging you and he can beat you in matches and you can still beat him, how do you continue that on? Like, do you watch back over any of the games that you'd played against him? How do you plan for the next time you face someone like that?
So our rivalry really began in Brazil, where we played each other in the grand final. He beat me 2-1 in the winner bracket final in Brazil. In the grand final, the first match in Brazil, and then I beat him 2-0. All 5 maps were DM Sacred. We both picked Sacred, and I was it that tournament where I was hiding on the roof of Sacred, and then suddenly the CPL banned that rule. Banned that. They banned hiding on weird parts of the map, which, it was visible. So it was really a weird rule. But yeah, anyway, my rivalry started there. And then you had Sweden next month, where I beat him 2-1, win the bracket final, and then 2-0 in the grand final. Both really close maps in the grand final. I think both came down to like the last 30 seconds.
Yes.
And then CPL Summer happened, where I also like winning Brazil and Sweden. I lost motivation again, and he was eager, man. John was super eager because he knew he was close. He really knew he was close. He lost the final twice to me, and then his home turf, CPL Summer 2005. He knew he was close, and I lost a bit of motivation. And I don't think I might have won a map that event. In the winner bracket final, it was 2-1, but then the grand final happened, and he just beat me 2-0. And I remember, I think there was a telefrag in there too. I made a comeback on the second map, DM Sacred. And then he telefragged me. Well, I was 5 frags behind, and it was huge because I had full control. And then, yeah, he beat me 2-0. He fair and square. He was much better than me at that event. And so I never really rewatched any demos because the demo capabilities of Painkiller were quite poor, sure. So to say. I don't think there was any HUD information in that patch. So basically, you had to rely on VODs if they were ever released. So it was quite watching. Painkiller match was quite rough, but then it basically went back and forth from ever since the US. He beat me in the US, and then 1 month later it was the CPL UK, where I lost to him in the winner bracket final, and then I beat ZYZ in the lower bracket final, then beat Fatality 4-0 in the grand final. I played some amazing Painkiller that day. I played really well, and I watched those matches after the event many times because I was hitting everything. Everything felt good. I think at one point I was up 31 frags on one map. Like, I dominated him in that final for some reason. I have no idea why. Then the next event was Singapore, yeah. And after that there was only, I think, Singapore, Italy, and Chile were 3 weeks, 3 weekends, 3 tournaments, 3 continents. It was brutal. Like, Singapore was 6-hour time difference. We flew to Singapore. I lost to Zacubus in the quarterfinal winner bracket. Stunned, like, who? Zacubus. Yes, sure. Zacubus got 4th in the UK, but I lost 2-0. I got destroyed by him. I was so upset, man. This is the first time I lost before the winner bracket final, basically. I was out. If I lost another match, I would have been top 12. I was devastated, man. So I got my head together and I came back, beating everyone in the lower bracket. Stellam on the way, Galasak. I got to the grand final. I won the first match. Funnily enough, the Singapore organizers thought I won the event, so they put my name on the check. Okay. And then, oh, wait a minute, guys, there's a second match. It's a lower bracket, upper bracket kind of thing. And then Fatality beats me. And that was his second tournament win. I was quite upset losing, but the World Tour had almost come to an end. CPL Italy a week later, literally a week later. I don't even think I came home in between that time.
Ah, okay.
It was brutal, man. Italy, I played Zacubus again. I beat him 2-1, and then I Fatality in the winner bracket final. I think it was 2-0 or 2-1, and then I beat him again in the upper final without losing. Or maybe I lost one match, and then I won the second match because I was from the winner bracket. Then next week, there's no time to watch back demos, even if you wanted to, because there was 3 events in 3 weeks. Then you had CPL Chile, which was unique in its own way because it was neither me nor Fatality in the grand final.
Yes.
I vividly remember losing to Strider in the semifinals. I think it was 2-0, and I knew Fatality was watching that match from the corner of my eye. Yeah. And I was down on like 10 frags on Sacred with like 30 seconds left, so I knew I had lost. So I type, let's see if our little plan works. And knowing that Fatality was watching, and I knew that Fatality had lost to Galasak Strider, I think, beat Fatality in the quarterfinals, and then I played. No, that can't be because we would have been both. We can only meet each other in winner bracket final. Someone else beat Fatality. It might have been Galasak. Anyway, point being, we made it seem like maybe to John, I was hoping that I lost to on purpose to Strider, which I really didn't. He beat me. Strider was a PK god that event. He was the only player to win a Painkiller event without dropping a map. Every single other event, so the winner always lost one map.
Yes.
Anyway, Strider beat me. I dropped to the lower bracket and I played Fatality in the lower bracket semifinals, I think, instantly. And I beat him 2-0, 2-1. And so our plan worked, even though it wasn't really a plan. It was just the way events unfolded. And then I lost to Galasak in the lower bracket final by Stake Gun, which I don't know if how well you know Spainkiller. The Stake Gun was a gun that instantly did 200 damage. It had like an arc, kind of slow, and on a long distance it did 250. It was insanely overpowered if you knew how to use it. Most players don't, including me. I never really abused it as much. There were certain players like Booms, Italian player. He was really fucking good at it. Fatality was good at it also. But then Strider and Galasek played the final, and I remember talking to Fatality, watching the final, looking at him with a huge hangover because all of us went partying out the night before, except Galasek and Strider who were in the final. I talked to him, man, this is so weird. We're not in the final, and he just shrugged it and he laughed. But yeah, just playing Fatality, it was just back and forth ever since CPL Summer. Either he would win or I would win. I'm not going to say it was a coin flip because I still felt I had the edge. But yeah, it was 50-50, 60-40 ever since CPL Summer. And that was the end of the World Tour, except for the grand final, of course.
Yes. When you were at your best in the tournaments you won, what were you the best at in Painkiller? What was your style?
Like I said earlier, it's just I was best at constantly being on the move, using shotgun, always doing a little bit of damage, and then the rocket fights were really important, where you could basically just move around your opponent whilst constantly shooting at him and keeping your momentum, and you retreat from a fight while still going at full speed, and then you go to an item. And I would imagine that most players were able to do this, but I guess I was just able to do it a little bit better. My timing was always on. Timing was actually really easy in Painkiller. It was 60 seconds for the Mega, which I hated. It used to be 40 seconds back in 2004. For some reason, they changed to 60. I was never a big fan. And the armors were 20 seconds. So picking up a gold armor, you were instantly a full armor, just like Quake World. And Quake 3 and Quake 2 and Quake 4 even after it came out afterwards, you could stack up on armors, but in Painkiller it was just gold armor and you're set to go. You know, you're good to go. You go for an attack. You just attack and maintain position. But yeah, it was me. I was just fast, man. I was just always at max speed, going at light speed and doing damage. Always having an escape route and just hitting your shots. Like the best servant for me was CPL UK, where I beat him 4-0 in the grand final. I was on fire that event. I do not know what possessed me, but my shotgun was on and I just hit everything, and timing was on. Everything clicks basically at certain events. You have some events where stuff just doesn't click, things go wrong, and then you have events where everything clicks.
So even though Fatality, his results obviously got better as the year went on, and then by the time we got to coming to the last phase, where, as you said, it was the 3 tournaments in like 3 months, he was winning events by now, and people knew, right, it's the two of you. Going into the World Tour Finals, right, the setup obviously was, there's a massive amount of money to be won at this. Like, actually, it was one of those tournaments that wasn't even just top heavy. Like, even if you finished I think 5th place, you got some pretty good money. That was more than the stops before if you'd have won them. So there was a lot of fucking money at this final. So coming into this one, were you unfazed by some of the losses you'd had before? Did you still think like, I've got to win this one. I'm a lock to win this one. Surely I'm the best player.
I knew I had, basically I knew it was going to be me and Fatality in the final. I pretty much knew that from the get-go, but you still have to do it. Like, people always expect, it's Vu, he's going to be in the final against Fatality, but you still have to be there, man. It's just like Federer and Nadal back 10 years ago. Yeah, they're going to be in the final, but they still have to do it. They still have to beat all these top players. It's not like it's handed to them on a silver plate.
Sure.
I played Sturmy in the semifinals in New York in the grand final, and I remember one map was really close. I beat him 2-0, but one map was really close. So it's not like every match was a breeze except Fatality. Every match, a lot of these good players, EYZ, Sturmy, Stellam, Strider, Galasek, they were all really good, man. So even beating them was always a hard task. Even though I knew I was better, it was still tough. But with Fatality, it was like the 2 events prior to that were Italy and Chile, and I both beat him in those events, so I had the edge. Also, you could mention that it was due time for him to beat me, because the match were going back and forth at that point in time.
Okay.
The winner bracket final. So the first, let me think. So the tournament was 3 days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So Monday we had the first 4 rounds, and then Tuesday was the winner bracket final, and then some lower bracket matches. And I beat him in the winner bracket final on Tuesday. It was still at the LAN Center. Fairly, I wouldn't say easily. The first map was fairly easy. The second map, I lost by 1 frag on Meatless. And like, if the match had lasted like 3 seconds longer, I would have killed him. And then the third map was Sacred, and I actually kind of like 5 to 10 frags. I beat him. So yes, I was in the final, and I had never lost at that time. I had never lost a tournament if I came from the winner bracket.
Yes.
So, yeah, obviously you're super confident going into that match, and then yeah, I remember. I still vividly remember this event because it's such a rough loss, man. This
well, let me put it this way, okay? Here's the way I would frame the question about the final.
Yeah.
Okay, when we've described before, we've set up the storyline. You know, you were going back and forwards. You know, you started off much better than him. He got very good, challenged you. Finally, you know, he could break through sometimes, but then he would lose to you at the next event. You know, and then you'd beat him. You know, it was going backwards and forwards, but people are going to think naively, right? Well, you guys have played, you know, how many? 10 times, maybe more than that already this year. This match was nothing like any of those matches, right? The grand final of this tournament, the way it played out and the way both players played.
It was a little bit different. So I was really confident on DM Psycho, which was a Quake World kind of map. There was no shotgun, so you could not slow down your opponent. And he basically used a tactic I had not seen before. I don't know how he came up with it, but it was, to spectate, it was awful. He would be in a silver armor room, just going back and forth, back and forth. And I would show up, and he would go out. He would run out of there and do whatever. And I was caught off guard there in the first map, and I lost it pretty convincingly. But in a sense, it was just another painkiller match for both of us, except, you know, what was at stake was a lot bigger, man. It was basically a $250,000 match, really. It was on stage. You know, you had smoke machines. You had 100+ people watching. You had, like, I think Angel said something, 100,000 people have watched the world tour. I'm not sure if you meant like New York only or the entire world tour. I'm not really sure about the numbers. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't like Twitch back in the day. There was no Twitch back then, so no one had an idea how many people were watching. Everything was very closed off, so to say. But I just practicing against ZYZ before that final, I was losing maps to him, man. I was just not feeling well that day. I slept poorly. I was super nervous. It was really weird because the days before I was fine, and then that final day happened and nothing clicked, man. It was just everything felt off. Poor sleep, nervous. ZYZ was beating me in practice maps, and that never really gives you confidence. And yeah, playing him in that final was just the first match. I lost fairly, like 10 frags both maps each, which was fine. You know, I had the advantage coming from the winner bracket, so I still had another match. And then the first map of the second match was then again Psycho, which in hindsight I don't think I should have picked Psycho because Sacred was the third map in the winner bracket final where I beat him more convincingly than Psycho, DM Psycho. So in hindsight, I should have just, after losing the first match and him trying that weird tactic, instead of just sticking to what I was doing those last few months, I always picked Psycho because I was practically unbeaten on that map. I should have just switched and be like, all right, I'm going to play Sacred as my map pick. But no, I picked Psycho, unfortunately, and I remember, I think it was 3-3 after 15 minutes. Duels were 15 minutes back then. I remember he was camping Mega, and I was walking up to him because I knew he was going to be there. And I walked up to him, and walking, you make no sound. And he was just standing there in front of me, and I looked at him for a second and a half. Could not believe that he was there. For some reason, I didn't shoot. I just looked. It's really bizarre how I normally in a practice match I would have just destroyed him. You know, I would have shot a grenade, a stay gun through it, bomb, 250 damage instantly. Here, I shot chain gun, tick, 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 and then I tried to stake him, and I missed. I did like 20 damage, and he was out of there. Like, it's so weird that that as a player I make these mistakes in a grand final. I guess it came down to nerves or just not feeling well that day. But I'm not saying that mistake made me lose the game, but things like that in the final is just I was really off my game.
Sure. So that is something from the outside that was quite obvious. Because as I said before, the difference is, okay, I remember all the games that he beat you because since you were winning so much in this tournament, you know, people would be, the memorable games are the ones where people finally took a map off you or beat you, you know. And usually, if he beat you, you both played at a pretty good level and he was the better guy that day. And it's kind of like you both play well and then one person tops out, right? Mm-hmm. In this match, the maps that you lost, some of them were like this. They either had a moment that was very weird where you did something bizarre like this, or as you said with the meatless, the Psycho example, he himself had a weird approach and it seemed like it rattled you a bit.
Yeah, it did rattle me because it was very hard to counter because I'd never encountered it before. So that's kudos to him. That's really smart of him to play like that. I had never seen it before. That makes sense because, like I said earlier, being constantly on the move is what I was known for, and then he applied it to the grand final. I don't know how he came up with it, but it was a solid tactic. It was boring to watch because really, instead of standing still at a corner of a map, you're just moving back and forth, maintaining speed, and as soon as I show up, you're out of there. But yeah, so that Psycho, I lost in overtime. I lost in a fight that I should have won. So I was 200 basically. I had control, and he just attacked me with 150 health, 150 armor. I outstacked him, but he shot a rocket. I was pushed backwards, and because I was pushed backwards, I think I shot a rocket at a window at myself, so it took some self damage, and then I lost that fight. It's a fight I was outstacking him, and I should have won that fight, but I just lost it due to a misplaced rocket. And then he won me on that map, and then I lost all confidence at that point. Meatless was his map pick. I'd never beat him in that event. He beat me twice already in the winner bracket final and the grand final, the first match. So then it was Meatless, and I was actually doing really well the second or fourth map of that grand final. I was it was like 5 minutes to go, and I was still leading by 2 to 3 frags. But he had full control, and it was very hard to break. And the first 8 minutes, 10 minutes, I was doing well on Meatless, but then he just got full control, and I could not stop him, and he beat me on that map, and then that was the end of the World Tour and the final. It was a rough loss, man. It was it haunted me for a few weeks after that, months maybe. It was I was better. I still believe to this day that I was better than him, and historically speaking, I am better. I beat him. I think it was we played 24 matches against each other. Of which 22 were best of threes, the 21 were best of threes, and 3 were best of one. I beat him 15 times, and he beat me 9 times, of which 2 of which were in the grand final. So historically, my results were better than his, and I placed better than he did in
the majority of the tour.
Yeah, 11 out of 14 Painkiller events, I placed higher than he did.
Okay. Aside from your side of the equation, which had its problems, as we've described here, obviously, part of Fatality's mystique and his success in a lot of games is, first of all, practice. That's obviously a key element he always stresses, but it's also the notion of being a clutch player, being able to perform under pressure. And does he have that quality? Is that an element that he was better than you in?
On that day, yes, but on other days, UK, for example, it was a fairly big event. There were a lot of live spectators. The setup was great, a lot of people watching, and then I outclutched him in the grand final. I beat him 4-0, like he beat me 4-0 in the grand final. So we were both clutch, really. Being that level of player, any of these top players, man, they're all clutch. If you start shaking like this and you miss your shots, then you're not going to be a top 3 player, really. So everyone is clutch at that level. And if Fatality is more clutch than me, or Raf or Cooler is more clutch than Fatality, or the other way around, whatever, I think they're all very high level players who always perform well when the pressure is on. It's just that this day it didn't work for me. But in general, I was never really nervous playing these big finals. I've been in so many, man. I've been in pretty much every single Painkiller event final. It's just that this match did something to me that made me not comfortable playing. Maybe it was the fact that everyone was American there and everyone was cheering for him.
Sure.
All the
crowd definitely wanted him to win for the storyline, right?
of course, an American playing an American event, you know, the crowd wanted him to win, but then the Painkiller players wanted me to win. It was fairly similar to what happened in Quake 4 when he was playing, I think, Toxic in the final. Like the studio wanted Fatality to win, but the players wanted Toxic to win, and Toxic succeeded where I didn't.
Yes.
But yeah, this event. I mean, still second is still not bad, man. I still won 100 grand in one match, and
sure,
it's not a bad result. So in the end, looking back, even though the final turn was a loss, I still had a really successful year, like more successful than I could have ever dreamed of back when the World Tour was announced. So in the end, I was happy. But that one match, I think, if I had won that, things would have been different.
So obviously an element of that match that sucked beyond obviously losing is the fact that it was the last chapter. You know, they didn't do another Painkiller World Tour. There wasn't another one. So no one ever knows what would have happened in the next tournament, in the next 3 months, in the next grand final. And so the problem is everyone's just left to make their case for why they were the best. So, Fatality, now I have to say, Americans in general, maybe because of their politicians, are always really good at this. It's the way you frame a narrative. Like, if you started so he always famously says, well, from the summer on, I won more events. Because that's true. You won 2 and he won 3. But then, that's like saying, well, except for all the times I lost, I was the better one. Yeah. So he will say, well, okay, maybe Vu did win more than me overall. But, if we'd have had more tournaments, I'd kind of got his number at that point in time. I would have gone on and beaten him in the future. And obviously, you can cite all the stats of 11 out of 14 tournaments you were ahead. Does that suck as well beyond just the loss that there was never a chance to avenge yourself, right?
There was never a chance. No, there was never a chance. Well, Quake 4, I could have played Quake 4 and avenged that loss, but I never picked up Quake 4. It's funny how both of us make our own little narrative of why we're better, like he did. Yeah, since the summer I won more, and I'm like, well, I won 11 out of 14. It's funny how we both trying to convince ourselves that we were the better player. So he probably, until his deathbed, thinks that he's the better player, and I will do the same for me, which makes sense, because. But one thing is clear: we were both definitely the number 1 and number 2 player. But yeah, it was a shame that there was never a follow-up event for that tournament, because I think Painkiller is a really fun game to watch, man. I think most people who watch it really enjoyed it because there was a lot of action. There was always action. You would always have fighting going on, and the fights were spectacular. They were fun. Everyone's fast. This might be hard to watch for the casual player, but it's fun to watch. So it's kind of shame that 2006 just dropped PK, and ever since that World Tour final, boom, PK dead. No one played anymore. So it was literally an esports game. There was never a community that existed outside the esports scene. So yeah, man, if there is a Painkiller event, if there's an organizer somewhere willing to host a Painkiller event, and yeah, I'll definitely play in it, and I'm hoping John shows up too to have that big rematch.
What was he good at in Painkiller by the end? What were his strengths?
Like I said, he copied my style and then made it a little bit different. So Painkiller was fairly simplistic, and that styles were not really distinct. It's not like Quake where you have these unique kind of styles. Painkiller was fairly similar in styles. Sure, you had some slower players and faster players. For example, Galasek had his own unique style, where Booms had his style with his stay gun. But in general, me, Fatality, Strider, ZYZ all played fairly similar. Just a lot of shotgun rocket usage, and Fatality's timing was always on, and he was fairly good at spawn fragging, running the spawns. Like on Sacred, he would kill you, and then he would just go in the center room. He would listen where you spawn, and he would hunt you down. But in general, his style was not that different than mine or Sturmy. It's just that Painkiller was also a lot about control. So you could get in control, and it was just impossible to break unless you hit that lucky stake. And the stake gun was always famous for being a luck weapon. In fact, it's a bit of luck, but also a lot of skill. I guess just like poker, which was also quite popular at the time. Sure. I remember playing poker with Destruct during those events. But yeah, hitting a lucky stake could change the outcome of a match. But in the end, the results were still fairly similar. Like the top was always the top.
Yes.
So it probably wasn't that random. But yeah, like I said, Fatality was good. Had a similar style to me. It's just a lot of running, a lot of shotgun rockets, timing, positioning, and spawn fragging.
So you referred earlier to the fact that you had Gelasak, who also, by the way, for reference, was another pro mod player, and was someone who'd obviously come from that game. And he was practicing with you, was one of the people living with you. Now, he had a very weird world tour in that, except for CPL Chile, he never really had the big breakthrough, you know. He was playing with you the whole time. He had the best player in the world to practice with, basically. What do you think his issues were?
Mental. I think Gelasak had a mental issue against some of these top players where, man, Gelasak was good. In practice, I'd beat him more than he beat me, sure, but he was good, man. He was really good. So it just goes to show that the competition at the top was really fierce. Like the top 8 players, except for me and Fatality, they could probably beat each other all the time. Like ZYZ would beat Sturmy, would beat Gelasak, would beat ZYZ, would beat Stellam, would beat Strider. And then Strider would be... So they could all beat each other. Like the number 3 spot was very heavily contested out of all events. Just the number 2 and 1 spot weren't as much. But Gelasak, I think it was a mental issue for him where if things did not go his way, he would just get upset and not lose motivation, but he would just throw away a map. Basically, things wouldn't go his way, and he would just be upset, get angry, and then just throw a few frags away. And then, you get back into it a minute later, but then you're like, you lost 4 or 5 frags, which is not much, but it can still decide games. So I think it was more of a mental issue with him where things don't go his way and he just breaks down mentally, which it happens to many top players, even to this day. Things don't go their way and they just cannot get into a proper mindset again at which they can compete.
So Strider, as you referenced before, when he won CPL Chile and he did it without even losing a map, at this one tournament, he looked exceptional. And in fact, throughout the whole tour, he was the guy where, like, I think he finished like top 6 at every event or something ridiculous. Yeah. But he would either have like just a top 6 or he would be exceptional. Like it seemed like this guy only had like one or the other. And I remember asking Too Good, because Too Good at the time was obviously working with Fnatic and you guys were all in the same org. And he said something along the lines of like Strider's like a really weird guy who, forget like motivation issues, he just doesn't seem to care for some reason. That's how he described him. So how was this guy so good but then didn't win more,
Yeah, man.
Because he did the same thing, by the way, in Quake 4.
I know.
He came along late in Quake 4, and then I think he once beat Toxic even, but at the same time, he never won any of the events. So, who is this guy?
Strider, man, he was so talented. He was really, really good. He had good aim, good timing, good positioning, good tactics. He would lose, and he'd be like, he just didn't care. He would win, and he didn't care. He was not socially awkward or anything. He would shake your hand, and he would laugh. And he would party, but he just didn't care. Like for some reason, maybe he has a load of cash at home waiting for him already. I don't know, man. But he just didn't care. But he was exceptionally good and a very, very talented player. I think one of the most talented players because he would probably practice the least out of all of us, and he'd still place top 6, like you said, every event, and winning Chile. So. Yeah, who is this guy, man? Like he just vanished after Quake 4 too. Like I haven't heard
from him since.
I haven't spoken to the guy in 10 years. Excuse me. I think he lives somewhere in Sweden. He was always one of the younger ones in the World Tour. I was quite young. I was 19, 20, but he was I think 17, 18. So he might be reaching 30 now. But what he does, I have no idea, man. He dropped after Quake 4. He never played Quake Live or Quake 3. I don't think. And in Quake 4 he was fairly successful. I think he got to the CPL or WSVG summer, I must say, in 2006. He beat Toxic, and then he lost to Sturmy in the winner bracket final. Then he lost to Toxic in the lower bracket final. He got 3rd, which at the time was like the biggest Quake 4 event up to that date. So he did fairly well. And then I think Toxic beat Sturmy twice in a grand final. But yeah, Strider, man, he was, like I said, very talented. He had no motivation to play. He played a lot of World of Warcraft 2 in the World Tour. A lot of World of Warcraft. So he just didn't care. He's a cool guy, man. He just vanished. I haven't spoken to him since the World Tour, really.
So a couple of other players I want to ask about tie into something that I noticed at the time and it's since become even more apparent about Painkiller. Perhaps because, as you've said, like stylistically, there wasn't like a massive amount of variety as to what you could do to be the best. Kind of the metrics for being the best was somewhat set, and therefore you ended up with fairly consistent results. As you said, you and Fatality in the finals most of the time. Yeah. And then you had these people, it was very stratified. So, for example, the two players I'm going to ask about are Sturmy and ZYZ, because here's the thing. They both were incredibly consistent players. Almost every stop, they'd make it to the same rounds of the tournament. Yeah. They'd beat the same sort of opponents. They'd lose to the same opponents. It's like, what's bizarre is, in another esports game that's more up and down or has so much more variety, you'd figure, they'd win an event and then they'd have an event and do badly. How could they be so consistent and yet never kind of break through properly? Why were they never actually really contending with you to win the titles?
Sturmy actually got to one final, the first Painkiller event, where he beat Fatality and then lost to me. He was 17 at the time, so he was fairly young. He was hungry too, man. He got to top 4 almost every time, maybe top 6 once or twice. I'm not sure. ZYZ got to a few finals in the beginning, but after that he got 3rd or 4th almost every time, or maybe or top 6. So basically both very similar players. I think it was because me and Fatality were just that much better than the rest. And for whatever reason we were, I don't know why, but we were just that much better than the rest. So realistically, in general, most people, they could just hope for top 3 because you'd had me or Fatality win. So,
did anyone else on the tour practice as much as Fatality, do you think? Does anyone else have that kind of drive?
I honestly, I doubt it. I'm not sure if he kept to the practice 8-hour schedule day for the entire year. I have no idea. I would assume he does it right before an event.
Yes.
And so did we, man. We went to me and Galasak, and then Strider flew in from Sweden. We went to Stellam's house. We'd sit in their basement with 5-6 computers, and we played a lot of Painkiller and some World of Warcraft, maybe secretly, but we played a lot of Painkiller, and we practiced a lot too right before an event. But then after event, no one played because online was crap. So I'm not sure if, I think Fatality had some boot camps with some Finnish players, Beam and Rat. I'm not sure Rat, but Beam, I think, and Zen before Sweden, maybe. I'm not sure. This is a long time ago, but he played a lot, but we all did right before an event, and the skill ceiling, I think, was reached quite early on. Like in the US, it was reached for me anyway. So to me, it felt practicing even more. There was no point, and like I mentioned earlier, it wasn't as fun back. Yes. After a year of playing, I thought World of Warcraft was much funner. And this was 2005 when WoW wreaked havoc on the pro scene, man. Like, I'm not sure if you remember, but WoW got so big in 05 and
Counter-Strike as well. There's a lot of players where it was actually quite famous. If a player was sort of like, if they took a break and they went to WoW, they almost never came back. Because
WoW was just so much fun back then, man. I still have good memories, and they might be rose-tinted goggles or whatever, which is actually quite funny that WoW Classic is coming back legally next year. But yeah, WoW was so fun at the time, and it was such a new world. And it got released at a perfect time. Everyone just got broadband connections. Everyone could always be online. It was just that much more fun than competing. Like after a year and a half of constantly competing, staying at the top, practicing, you must win, you must do well, and suddenly you could play World of Warcraft, where you could just play a video game, man. You could explore the world, meet new people, have fun, die, but it doesn't matter because you can spawn again and kill the boss. And it was so much fun to play World of Warcraft when you're competing all the time, which is stressful. It's really stressful competing at all these events, flying out to 3 continents in 3 weeks, eating unhealthy because back then you didn't have, like right now, you go to an event, you have catered food. Yes. Back then you had to it was everyone for himself, man. You had your manager maybe getting some food, but in general,
okay,
it was.
Let me ask you something along those lines then, because that's actually something that I also know that Fatality was way ahead of the game on in esports. Because, by the way, there's some players in like Counter-Strike that I know now, especially young players, where they're still bad at this, which is what you do that isn't the game, basically. So, like, Fatality was very good at, like, when you go to sleep and then what meal you eat. Like, famously, apparently, he had some weird thing where he just wouldn't eat. He'd, like, eat a big breakfast and then he would wait till after the tournament. So he never kind of had, like, and his energy wasn't getting affected. You know, he had a lot of things mapped out that admittedly are just sports techniques, you know, as how professional sportsmen train, but no one else really applied it back then. Everyone was just a gamer, you know, people who were competitors just happened to be very good at that game, you know. What was it like for you in that sense? Because, I mean, you obviously hadn't even really been a pro before this.
Great question. I think caffeine is something I tried to avoid back then. Energy drinks were, yeah, of course you had energy. I don't think Monster was around, but Red Bull definitely was around. Yeah. But I try to avoid. I didn't drink coffee. I drink some sodas, but I tried to avoid caffeine and sugar during tournaments because I felt like it made me twitchy. What comes into play, at least for me, is a lot of things get stuck in your head. Like it becomes mind games with yourself, you know. So the second event I ever went to, CPL Summer 2004, I remember eating a burger with Stellam in the sports bar in the Gaylord. I'm sure you've been there. But
that was like the only edible thing there. It's
exactly,
quite famous, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So I had a burger in the sports bar. Guess what? A month ago or 2 months ago at QuakeCon, I had another burger there. Okay. Anyway,
did it become like that? Did you get superstitious about things?
Yes.
Like try to do the same thing if you want?
Absolutely, man. It was all in my head. Like, so I had a Coke at that event, and so I always felt like I should drink Coke because I won that event, and because I won that event and I drank a Coke, that must be related, you know, sure. Which is bullshit. But I had like a little, what was it? A champagne bottle closer. I don't know how I obtained it, but I always had it in my left or right pocket. I think my right pocket when I played, and like it was like my lucky thing, just like Fatality had his tiger on top of his monitor. Unfortunately, I lost that little thing at CPL Summer where they stole my bag. So that might have been the reason why I stopped winning as much. It's not, but
no, but it has to be in the back of your mind if you've established it, right? That's the problem. Is the power you give it, it will have that power over you in a way. Right?
Exactly. So I always wanted to wash my hands before a big match. You know, go to the toilet, wash my hands, preferably with warm water because that keeps your hands warm. But then some events had cold water or whatever. But I always had to wash my hands, and yeah, these little superstitions came into my head, and I've played tennis at a fairly high level too. And before the first serve, I bounced the ball 4 times. Before the second serve, I bounced the ball 3 times. It's about superstition, yes, but also about consistency. So if you do something consistently, if like you said, Fatality had a sleeping schedule that he adhered to. You know, or big breakfast in the morning. I actually never knew that. Big breakfast in the morning, so he didn't have energy dropouts during the day. If you have consistency, then you know what to expect. So everything's the same. So your next match is the same as the last match. It's the same as the next tournament. Everything is the same. It's consistent. So I guess he was ahead of its time back then because for me, sleeping schedules, boot camping, I would go to bed at 6 a.m., 2 a.m., 4 a.m. Like it was all over the place. I was young. I was 19, and he was a little bit older. He was 24, 23, 25, I think at the time. So he was a little bit more mature. Still a kid by, you know, thinking back at it now. We were all kids back then, but he was a little bit mature than all of us. But yeah, he was ahead of its time where he was more methodical in the way he approached the game than me or Strider. Especially Strider was like all over the place, man. He would not sleep for a night, and then he was all over the place. But yeah, superstition, man. That's one thing that I was big on back in the World Tour. I always had everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be perfect, and my setup, my mouse, everything.
obviously at the time, in fact, for people who didn't like Painkiller, one of the things that we were told to kind of take solace in was like, well, one of the other reasons we're doing Painkiller is because, you know, we want to start with a game that we can control all the factors in, and then, you know, we'll see what happens. And the idea was they originally, at least they told the public this, that, you know, every year there would be a Painkiller, there would be a World Tour rather. It's just, you know, would it be in Painkiller? Would it be in a different game? They made it like they were going to make the model work and then they'd expand it out. Now, obviously that didn't happen because actually the very next year was the one where CPL started to wind down and it had all these like sponsor issues, and by it got to 2007 it was somewhat dead.
Yeah.
And so did you know at any point until the end of the tour that there might not be a next year in Painkiller? Did you go into all this thinking to yourself, there'll be a 2006 World Tour and I'll play that as well? What was it like from your perspective?
Oh, I knew that Painkiller was the World Tour was it for Painkiller. Like, I knew that after the grand final, Painkiller was done for, and they were going to play a new game. Because has the World Tour succeeded in bringing pro gaming to the masses? I don't think so, because you pick a game, you throw a lot of money at it. At the time, $1 million was a lot of money.
Sure. And
you would hope for a community to form, for people online to play, for leagues to form, but none of this happened. It was just a game for the
old joke was
players.
There was 17 players because, you know, there was 16 at every tournament or whatever. So
yeah.
That was the old, but it was kind of true in a way, right?
It's sad, but it was true. There were just Painkiller pro players, and then you had some random no-names playing online. And some people still play Painkiller to this day, but it must be like no more than 10. But yeah, so in a way, the World Tour failed in bringing Painkiller to the public. So I knew at the time that Painkiller was not big and there was no community, and FPS wasn't doing well in general. Deathmatch FPS at the time, it was just not doing well. You know, you had CS, you had StarCraft, you had Warcraft. Those games were doing really well. But Quake 3 was also not doing great, man. It was also losing players left and right. 2 other games, World of Warcraft for one, but even CS. But then you had and Quake 4 got announced, and I pretty much knew that Painkiller was done for.
Okay. So as you referenced there, like actually the first big Quake 4 tournament was the CPL Winter. So this was basically like a few weeks, just under a month after the World Finals for Painkiller. Right. Obviously, you weren't a player in Quake 4. Some of the players did transition over. Obviously, the ones who had Quake backgrounds especially were successful. You had Sturmy, you had some of these players go over and play. Was it some of the things you're referring to before, like, you know, you've just played a whole year, you'd have to start a bit late, etc. Did Quake 4 as a game, did it not appeal to you?
So the World Tour finished late November 2005, and then CPL Winter was in 4 weeks later. Quake 4 had come out early November, so I was 2-3 weeks behind, and CPL Winter was the game would have been out for like 6 or 7 weeks. So I would, you know, if a game exists for 1 year and you start 2 weeks late, it doesn't matter. But if a game is out for 6 weeks and you start 2 weeks late, yeah, those 2 weeks could be a big issue. So that was so I was at Fnatic at the time, and Sam Matthews said, man, Fu, I don't think you should go because you're a big Painkiller player. You're huge right now, and I don't think you're going to do well at Quake 4 at this event, at least, because you haven't had enough time to play it.
Okay.
And I was decent at the time. I was quite good. I'm not sure how good because the game was really new for me. But I had played some Quake 3, played a lot of CPM, and Quake 4 was a little bit different than Quake 3. It was still Quake, but it had crouch sliding, which I loved, by the way. Not as much as bunny hopping, but crouch sliding still allowed me to use movement to my advantage, which Quake 3 never really allowed me to do because it's just in a straight line strafe jumping.
Yes.
Whereas Quake 4 crouch line, you could go around corners on the floor, and I loved it. My movement was actually quite good. It's just that back then I had no good concept of Quake Duel. I mean, I was good at I was decent at Quake 3 Duel, but not top. But Quake 4 was a new game, so yes, I would not have been a top 3 player at CPL Winter probably because I was behind and I was not a Quake dueler at the time. But I still wanted to go. But Sam told me, "Nah, we're not gonna send you," which was all right by me. And then I think the Euro Cup happened. I did all right. I played Wins, who ended up winning ESWC that year.
Yes.
And I beat Wins in the Euro Cup. And then I beat, in the winner bracket, I beat Fox in the Euro Cup. Those were basically my biggest Quake 4 achievements, was beating Wins and Fox in the Euro Cup. Then I lost to Cooler in the winner bracket final. I was moving at the time. I lost to Cooler. I forfeited to Cooler. Never played him. Then I lost to Wins in the lower bracket final. And then I think that was my last official Quake 4 match ever. So I was burnt out also, man. I moved to an apartment in early 06, close to a lot of my friends. After a year on a tour, I was just burnt out of competing, traveling, pressure, doing well. And I had a name for I had built a name for myself. I was Vu. I was like the best player, Painkiller player in the world, arguably. And then I felt that I had to do, if I was not as good in Quake 4, I would not be a success, if that makes sense. So I was only going to play Quake 4 if I was going to be top 3, and I lost motivation. World of Warcraft was out, and that game was a lot of fun, and I played World of Warcraft, man, that entire year. At least the first 6 months of that year, I just didn't play Quake 4. I watched some events, but I never really got into Quake 4, and I watched it from a sideline. I went to ESWC. I saw this young kid named Cypher. He was 16 or 15 at the time. I'm not sure. He was super good, man. I think he got second, losing to Wins in the final. But yeah, that was Quake 4 for me. It never caught me in a way that Painkiller or CPM did. It was fast, but it came out at the wrong time, basically, for me, because yes, I was at a very high skill level in pro gaming, but a year and a half on the tour, it just burnt me out. Also, only players to play Quake 4, the only Painkiller regulars to play Quake 4 were ZYZ, were Sturmy and Fatality, and they didn't play a single event for the first 6 months of 2006, I think.
They were burned out as well.
Oh yeah, it was rough, man. It was brutal. All this traveling and playing and competing, it does something to you. Yeah, sure, you can think, you play video games, man. You just sit on your ass and play video games all day. But yes, it's true. But you're competing against other players who do nothing more rather than beating you. So it's very stressful, I think. Yeah. So those two players as well, they didn't play a single event for the first few months of Quake 4.
So, when you said you watched some of the Quake 4 events, did you actually watch that final then, where the next year in the grand final, his Quake 4 story is very different because he wasn't like battling Toxic every event. He only basically at the big finals did Fatality get very good and come to the final. But as you referenced before, it basically looked like what would happen to you and Painkiller. Like he was starting to beat Toxic, and then people were like, "Oh, is it going to be the same story again?" And obviously, if it had, like, everyone would be like, "Is this a fucking movie or something?" Like, it's too ridiculous, the storyline. Must have been pretty surreal to see that happening, right? I
watched that final, but not live. I'm not sure what I was doing back then, but I was fairly disconnected after ESWC 06 from the Quake scene in general. I went to school. I started studying in Amsterdam again, because I basically quit my studies for Painkiller, because there was no way I could combine studying and playing on the tour. So in 06, in September, I started studying again. So I was really disconnected from pro gaming in general for quite a while, actually. I never really watched that match because I never really watched that much Quake 4 Duel after first few months. I do know that Fatality won the first map 2-1, I think, and then Toxic destroyed him on the next two maps. And something, there was a rumor going around that Fatality paid Toxic to make him win or something.
Sure.
I don't know if that's true. I was an outsider, but to me it looked like a player like Toxic, who was really that much better than everyone else in Quake 4, suddenly losing to Fatality in that matchup, and then the second match he just destroyed him, like 25 plus frags. It's fishy to me. To be fair, it's fishy. I don't know what happened. Maybe some under the table money. I have no idea. But yeah, I don't know, man. I never watched it live, and I was fairly disconnected. But as an outsider, it seems fishy.
Okay, right. obviously you did actually, you said you played Warcraft. Briefly, for a couple of years, there was actually a competitive World of Warcraft scene. I'd say that, by the way, because obviously there still is to this day, and it still continues. It's just that it's not part of the wider esports context anymore. It's just a Blizzard thing now. But because, and for people who are outsiders, it's because this was one of the first early games where, think about how many people play World of Warcraft. You could get very high viewing figures. That's why they did a couple of tournaments, right? And you did compete in one with your old mates from Fnatic. You had Too Good and you had Strider on your team. How much did you actually play the competitive side of World of Warcraft? And wasn't it kind of a bit of a weird game? I remember knowing, because at the time, like, I knew some of the players later who played it when I was in SK, and the way they described the game, it sounds like a very weird esports game.
So what's different was that in Quake, you could just jump in and you could be just as good as your next opponent, as the player you're playing against. You're an equal level. Practicing World of Warcraft is super hard because so basically when I decided to go for this event with Strider and Too Good, I was playing Alliance, a mage, and they were playing Horde. So we could never play with each other. So I had to I had to borrow an account from a friend of Too Good, which was an undead mage. Too Good played Warrior and Strider played Paladin. So I had to borrow an account which was heavily undergeared compared to them. So we could never practice, so we were always already behind the curve practicing. But yeah, like I said, Quake or CS, you don't level up. You just start the game and you're just as good as the player on the other side of the server. But in World of Warcraft, you had gear, you had level, you had whatever, and chance. So practicing was very difficult for that game. And also, so practicing was just super hard. And then I had this shitty account that was super undergeared, and I had to play a lot in order to at least be a little bit competitive for this 3v3 arena. And it was fun, man. It was a cool event. We went to China. I think we boot camped in the Fnatic office in London at the time, and it was the first World of Warcraft event ever. It was my only time visiting China. So it was a fun event. We got second. We lost to Pandemic, I think, in the grand final. We lost them in the winner bracket final 3-1. I think the games were best of 5 in maps back then.
Okay.
Or best of 3. I'm not sure. And then we lost 3-0 in the grand final. But I'm not going to say that we were the second best team in the world, because we're probably not. But we had competitive experience. So it was easier for us to play in these, to get sent to this big event and play World of Warcraft as a tournament. So it was quite cool for me to say that I was in the first World of Warcraft tournament ever, and getting second was actually quite good. The number 3 team, I forgot the name, but they had like a keyboard turning warrior, and I remember Too Good got really pissed at me for not being able to easily get him off me as a mage, because a mage was a counter to warrior back then. Like a warrior would constantly sit at the mage would frost block and blink or whatever, and this was a keyboard turning warrior. So think about someone playing Quake without a mouse or a gamepad. Actually, there was a Quake Champions player with a gamepad at the ESWC a month ago. It was quite funny. But thinking the level at this event was not super high, and I think we played on Taiwanese or Thai servers. I don't know. We had ping 800. So whatever you saw on your screen happened like a second ago, basically. So counterspelling or countering was very hard. So this was a cool event. We got second. We made like $1,500. It was cool, but that was it for me for World of Warcraft. I think we tried for one more event. We said we were going to go to one more event, but I lost motivation to play. And playing with Too Good is quite hard, because he can be a dick.
Annoying.
He can be an ass, so to say. And
absolutely, yeah. As certain game developers would say, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. And he was actually really good at World of Warcraft, man. Too Good. He was a great warrior, and he would constantly give me and Strider shit about how he played, and it was. And he was better than us for sure, but I'm not sure it was the right way to approach your teammates, and maybe that was what caused us to stop playing World of Warcraft as a team.
Right, I realised when I learned about the competitive World of Warcraft side of things was much later. It was a couple of years later when it was in like IEMs, etc. And at that point in time, I remember actually SK had some of the best players at the time. And I remember talking to some of these guys, you know, at events when you've got travel time and downtime, you know, you talk about what's going on in the game. And I remember telling one of them, like, I've followed so many esports games, you know, even games like, for example, I didn't play that much StarCraft, but I'd followed Brood War because I got into it, you know, it was a very addictive game to watch. And I said to this guy who was like one of the top pros, like, I just can't follow this game though. Like, I watch it, and I just still don't know why you won in this situation. And he literally told me, oh, don't worry about that. Like, even basically people who aren't us, like basically anyone who isn't like an elite level pro, also won't really know all the time why we did something or what the dynamic was, you know. Was it a very complicated game?
There's so much happening on your screen. You have 6 players, and there's so much happening in the game. When I watch it, man, even as a player who knows Arena back then, I know why people were doing what they were doing, because back then the game was fairly simplistic to what it is now. Like right now, you have much more abilities, I think, and it's not just button mashing. There's really very much depth to it, and it's a lot of countering. So, you know, a paladin or a priest does a holy shield. Oh, no, sorry, a paladin does like a holy shield, and the priest can mass dispel it. But the mass dispel is has a cast time. So if your rogue is on the priest at the time, he can kick it. But then someone might be on the rogue, stun locking it. It's a lot of ABC and rock paper scissors. But I'd say there's a fairly big depth to 3v3 Arena, but it's just so freaking hard to follow. Like you said, it's really, really hard to follow. And I'm surprised if you played enough, then, and if you, also the problem is that there's like 10 classes. And
so you have to know all these interactions.
Yes, you have to know all these classes. So you have to know that what a paladin is capable of, and you have to know what a rogue or a mage or a priest is capable of. You have to know their way of playing and their specs. So I guess the best players in the world know every single class. They've played every single class at a high level. So that gives you an advantage, because then you know each class in and out. But yeah, I don't think it's that good of a esports game, even though a lot of people play it. But sure, a lot of people play it not because of Arena, but because of PvE.
Yes. Okay. So one aspect that I wanted to ask you about is this might shock a lot of people who didn't follow the scene back then, but when you were in Fnatic and you were doing this whole world tour, etc., Fnatic was not Fnatic as it's thought of now, one of the biggest orgs in the world with all these different games. Basically, as you said, Sam Matthews was the guy who started it, and actually before that he'd started a different org before that wasn't as successful. I think it was like in Quake or something, and maybe Enemy Territory I think he maybe played. And I remember when he started the Fnatic org, it basically was Vu. Like, you were the big name person in it. He had like a rubbish CS squad initially. That his CS squad didn't get rolling till the next year when they got Forest and, you know, some of the really mega players. Yeah. So at the time, the fact that you were literally the consensus best player in the world in a game that was one of the, like, yes, in terms of player base, it wasn't big, but in terms of, like, you know, premier marquee esports titles, it was one of the biggest. This was big for launching Fnatic, and at the time, the metrics for how you share prize money were very different. Like back then, you used to literally give some of your org some of the prize money. Now, you know, the cut can be very limited. Now, sometimes some people only give their org either nothing if they have a very good deal, or, you know, 10%. Back then, you know, orgs got more of the prize money, all these aspects. So, yes, they've done a fantastic job since then with other games, and they've obviously been very successful in many different games. So what was your relationship like with Fnatic? Because it can't have just been, I'm just a player in the team, right? There's, to some degree, you were in some sense responsible for making Fnatic what it is, right? Or giving them the initial push? How would you describe it?
I describe it myself as I kickstarted Fnatic into the esports scene, because they started in June 2004, and I think I joined June or maybe July 2004. So I was basically with them at the very first event, which was CPL Summer 2004. We had the Unreal Tournament 2004 TDM team, and they had me. And I was basically in it since the very, very beginning. And then 2005 happened, and the World Tour happened, and Painkiller was the game, and they had me and also Galasek and Strider, who were good but not as successful as me, obviously. They had some Warcraft 3. They had a Warcraft 3 player, Rotterdam, who's a fairly big name nowadays. He was also not. He was a good player.
Up and comer at the time.
He was an up and comer. He was a young guy, up and comer, but he never reached grubby status basically.
Yes.
And then they had I'm not going to say rubbish CS squad, but they weren't top. They weren't very good compared to the squad they got later with Forrest and Karn and whoever. So I think I kickstarted Fnatic back in 04, 05, and then they got like big sponsors because of me, because I brought them attention. I brought them into the scene. But my relationship with Fnatic was purely as a player. Like back then, I was never intending to stay in esports for a very long time because I was just a player, man. I was just Painkiller is fun. I'm gonna play it, but after Painkiller, I'm probably done. I'm gonna study and be like a normal person, have a degree and go to work for some XYZ company. So I was never motivated to be on the management side of an esports team. And back then I was also very lazy. I was young, lazy, and so
playing World of Warcraft, so that doesn't help.
Yes, play World of Warcraft, that doesn't help. And so I was never really interested in doing any management stuff. But I think I kickstarted Fnatic into the esports scene, but it's not that I made them as big as they are now, because obviously a lot of stuff happened after I left. So I can't really take credit to that, but I think I kickstarted them. I think I'm on their Hall of Fame section on their website. A really old a really old picture, and they misspelled my name. And I've already asked Sam twice, and Karn wants to change it, but I don't think they changed it yet. But so early days was Sam, Anne, and I think Siza. And Sam, and he always had this vision for esports. It was quite cool to see how driven he was with Fnatic. Like, it was his baby, and it was really cool to see that he had a vision for esports and that he just stuck with it with Fnatic for all this time. And as for me, I never thought that esports could be as big as it is right now. Like, I always thought it might be a niche. This might not be going anywhere. CPL dead. WSVG died. FPS games weren't doing too well, but I was looking at it from a first-person shooter's perspective, where I looked at it from like a niche. I looked at it from my kind of game. I never looked at.
And obviously, the Counter Strikes and League of Legends of the world's what took over.
Yeah, Counter Strike was already quite big at the time. CS 1.6, and then I basically was off the grid for a few years. But when I came back, it was like, holy shit, I got super huge, man. I never expected it to get that big. So in hindsight, I wish I did some, stayed in Fnatic or whatever, or did some management stuff in esports. But
sure.
I never expected it to become so big as it did.
Well, the analogy I give people nowadays is it's like Bitcoin. If someone heard about Bitcoin but they didn't invest, everyone has that story like, oh, I should have just put all my money in, but that's just because we know what happened now. At the time,
you can't say that.
You have to make your decisions based on what you were doing at the time. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you obviously had your break. You had this little dalliance with World of Warcraft, but then we did see you from time to time when Quake Live came along, which was obviously, for people who don't know, basically like a remodeled version of Quake 3. It's very similar, but it had a few key
basically Quake 3 balance. To be honest. Yeah.
But and it was obviously played through a browser and you're free to play and all these elements, right? So when this game came along, the way that we first encountered you was you went and attended just the American Championship for IEM. And what they used to do is they had the American Championship and you placed, in theory it was top 2, but since you had Rafa in that region, he was going to win other stops. Really, it was top 3 you had to finish to make it to these. So one year you finished 4th, which, as people can tell by what I just said, means you do not qualify for the World Championship. The next year, you managed to qualify. You went to the World Championship, right? Why are you in the American Championship, Vu? Explain that part to me, because you are from the Netherlands, you lived in the Netherlands, you were doing school or something in America? What was the situation?
Yes, hold on, my camera. So basically, 2008 had ESWC. Hold on, I guess my roommate turned on the heat, so it's super warm suddenly. Right. So, or I'm getting nervous from all these questions, man. No, so basically, 2008 had Quake 3 at ESWC.
Yes.
And Game Gyun, and I think another tournament. I'm not sure,
there was another ESWC tournament. It was Athens. It was.
Yeah, you had Athens, which was Quake
There was
3
two,
or
they
Quake
did-
Live. I'm not sure. He had also
They were both Quake 3. I
yeah,
think.
yeah. So you had also ESWC San Jose, which was also Quake 3. So yeah, I back then I was living in Amsterdam, not far from where you live now, actually. And I suddenly got the itch. I think in January, February, I played some CPMA tournament. I was really eager to win that, and I brought my 17-inch CRT to my apartment.
Okay.
Back then, TFTs were awful, man. They were horrible.
For sure, yeah.
So I got my old CRT. I got playing at 120 hertz, and I played that CPMA tournament, and I won it. And suddenly I got the itch. It's like, man, I want to play Quake again, and I started playing Quake 3, and I wanted to qualify for the ESWC Masters tournament in Paris. So I started playing Quake 3. I think I boot camped with Avec in Amsterdam. He was with Serious Gaming at the time.
Yes, which was the Dutch org, obviously.
Yeah, and the guy, excuse me,
He's called Bass, right?
Bas, the manager of Serious Gaming, who is off the grid now. I have no idea where he is. He lived in Amsterdam. He literally lived 5 minutes away from me by bike. So I boot camped with Avec for that event. And actually, I did fairly well, man, at that event. I qualified. I played the Dutch qualifier. I lost to IF22 in the final, and then they announced that the number 2 player was able to qualify for the San Jose event as well.
Okay.
So I qualified for that event. Then the Masters came, the Paris Masters, which was invite only, I think, and they invited me. I lost to 0-4, Gilson, and someone else. I all lost 2-1. It was my first Quake 3 event ever, and I lost every match 2-1. So. Okay. I was a good player. I just never was able to consistently win or do well on all maps. But I was a good player in Quake 3, I think. Not top, but then GameGune came in Spain, and I got to the playoffs, and I lost to Sparty and Cooler, I think. I got top 8 out of 16 or 20. Quake 3 and Quake Live, for me, I was always good. I was always at the top, but I was never, when I was in Painkiller, and to me it was like, why would I keep playing this game if I'm never going to be a number 1, number 2, number 3 player? To me, it's like maybe I just don't have that dedication, or maybe the prize money wasn't good enough. I'm not sure what the reasons were, but I was never super into Quake 3 and Quake Live because I never felt that it was the right game for me. Whereas Painkiller and CPM was the right game for me. There was like it's like the game was made for me, basically. So I never had that in Quake Live. Anyway, back to your question. Why did I play in these American events? Is I went to QuakeCon 2008, which was the very first Quake Live event, and also my very first Quake Live, or my very first QuakeCon. And I met this girl at the time, and basically we had a relationship, and I figured, I wasn't really getting a good studying in the Netherlands didn't really go well. I'd started a degree and I quit after half a year and did other stuff. So I just said, fuck it, I'm going to move to the US. And I moved to Dallas, where she lived at the time. And I went to school there at the University of Texas at Dallas, which is actually like 5 minutes away from its software office. So yeah, I moved to the US. I did not play much Quake Live at all. Just when an event was announced, like the ESL IEM US events, I started playing Quake Live just for those events again. And I did fairly well, I think. I think that the first event in 2009, like you said, I placed 4th. I lost to De Hang in the semifinal, and then lost a 3rd, 4th place match to Chance.
Yes.
And then the next year, I was actually in good shape for the New York ESL IEM New York. I actually practiced a lot for that event. I thought I was in really good shape. I beat DKT 2-0 in group stage, Chance 2-0, and someone else 2-0. I basically aced my group stage. I played really, really well. And then I had to play De Hang in a semifinal, and I was down 2 maps, 2-0, and then I came back 2-2. Then we played Hectic. This was one of my toughest Quake Live losses because I was really close on beating De Hang, and De Hang was a formidable Quake Live player. Yes. Sure, he wasn't Rafa, but not many were. But he was definitely a top 5, top 8 player in the world, I think. Sure. So he was a really good Quake Live player. So I played this event. I felt really good, and I lost the 5th map in sudden death or overtime. And I was devastated, man. I was so close of being in another final. Sure, it was a regional final.
Yeah.
but it's still top players at the time. But yeah, I lost to the Hang, and I beat CZM in the third place match, so I got third. It was still quite a good result for me. But still, I was third at a regional event, and then you had all these European players who were amazing at the game. Cooler, Sturmy, Cypher, Toxic, whatever. You had all these good Quake Live players in Europe that I still had no idea how they were playing. And basically that event was the last Quake Live event for me that I took really, really serious. After that, it just all went downhill for me. I played DreamHack Winter that year. I did really, really poor. There were 2 events that DreamHack Winter. I lost all 5 matches. I had this huge jet lag. I could not get out. I had a shitty event. And then half a year later, I played the event I qualified for in New York. Yes. Was the ESL
World Championship.
World Championship. I think I lost my group matches then. I broke up with the girlfriend that I moved to the US for, like 2 weeks before that event. So I was not in the right state of mind, man. I think I left. I lost the tournament, so I left the same day. It was a really bad event for me. So there was one point in my Quake Live career, if you want to call it a career, because I never took it like Quake Champions or Painkiller Series, where I lost 10 matches in a row. I lost 5 matches at DreamHack Winter, and then I lost 5 matches at the ESL World Championships. So that was Quake Live for me, basically. And then I played some QuakeCons here and there because I lived in Dallas, so why not play QuakeCon? But I was always like a top 8, top 12 player at QuakeCon because I just started. I would play Quake Live for a month before the event, here and there. I would practice a bit, and then maybe I get in the money, but I never did. But yeah, top 8 QuakeCon, top 12 QuakeCon was as much as I could hope for in Quake Live.
Okay. Excluding Quake Champions, where obviously, because it's been so long, a lot of actual old players have come back and are playing, a lot of the people from your era. In general, it's actually a pretty common trend that anyone who was like a dominant champion in a game that was a duel game, whatever version it might be, it's actually very famous that oftentimes they don't go into the next game, and sometimes they just leave it as, right, I was the best in that game and maybe I tried a little bit, but a lot of them, my sense is, it's hard to come into a game, not be as good, not be the best, and then know like kind of the massive uphill climb you're going to have to do to hope to be the best, because it's never guaranteed, right? So sounds like this is something that has been a pattern for you, right? That's tough to go all in on a game when you never know if you can become number one, but you were in the past. Like, does the contrast of knowing that you're the best in the past make it harder to just start from zero?
Yes, ego is a big thing, man. If you keep winning in one game and suddenly you have to switch to a new game and you get beaten by players you think you should beat. Yes. That's the key here. You think you should beat because you think you are better. That is huge. So for me, trying to play Quake 4, it's like I'm playing these guys and I'm like, dude, I would totally destroy you in Painkiller. But that's so irrelevant because it's a new game. And then Quake Live happens, which is Quake Live to me is just really Quake 3 in a new coat. Yes. The gameplays, the balance might be a little bit different, but in general, it's still really Quake 3. So I would play Quake Live and I'd be like, man, this guy, I would beat him in CPM, but who cares? It's irrelevant. So, but still, it eats at you, you play these guys and you think you should beat them in this other game, but it's a new game, so it's not really important how you would do in a different game because it's a new game. So, but yeah, for these like Toxic was actually. He was also good in Quake 3, and he was very good in Quake Live, but he never really was.
Never went super hammered it, right? Until the latter years, he sort of played a bit,
Yeah, I think so, yeah. But Quake Live was also a different beast because how active was it really the last 5 years? It was basically just QuakeCon, right? And that's it. Like after ESL dropped it, it was all downhill from there. It was just QuakeCon and maybe some DreamHack here and there. But I think DreamHack dropped it too in 2012 or 13. And after that, it was just QuakeCon once a year. And I'm not really sure how active people were playing it. I definitely wasn't playing. But I think people after QuakeCon, they would stop for a few months, like the pro players. And then, 6 months before QuakeCon, they would come back again. So how active was Quake Live at its tail? I don't think it was that active, but for people to it's hard, man. You're good at one game and you have to apply that same set of skills to a different game when the game can play completely different. It's hard. It's mentally, I guess, pride comes into play, ego and pride, I think.
So I saw that actually a couple of years ago you played some Reflex.
Yes.
And if anyone's listened to the interview so far, so he didn't play Quake World, but he did play CPMA, then he played Painkiller. Reflex should be right up your alley. I mean, it makes sense as a fun game. It's sort of in their wheelhouse, right? Was it just purely for fun you played? Did he play the game much?
So Reflex was basically CPMA physics with new maps and different weapon dynamics, but it had a railgun, it had a different name, it had a lightning gun, a different name, it had a rocket launcher, a knockback, but basically had CPMA movement with some little additions. That game was a lot of fun, man. When I think that game is really, really awesome. Back when I played it, which was in I think 2014 or 15, I'm not sure. I think at the time I just finished my degree, so I played it for like 3-4 months in between school or jobs. I'm not sure. The game was a lot of fun, and like you said, it was right up my alley. I've never been beaten in a tournament setting in Reflex. It was just my type of game. Also, not many really good players played it. Yes, sure, some CPM players played it, but not many of like the pro Quake players played it. I don't think anyone. So, yeah, the game was awesome. I was actually really good at it. I won. I think I played like 3 or 4 events in the US, and I won them all. So there was also a European scene that I never really got to play in because I lived in the US at the time, and I lived in Texas, and the netcode was actually fairly decent. I could play on Dutch or UK servers, and I did well against the European pros. I would beat them sometimes in practice, and I would lose to them sometimes. But obviously, I had a huge ping disadvantage. But I think the game was right in my alley. It was like CPMA, Painkiller, Quake World, super fast, instant weapon switch, powerful armors. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Because now when we talk about Quake Champions, I actually think, bizarrely, you have a very good reason to like Quake Champions and to be more interested in devoting yourself to this game, precisely because one of the features of Quake Champions is the different champions have different movement abilities, and anyone who has played it knows the ones that have the CPMA type movement, if you have never played one of those games, you better get started learning, because you have to know how to play against that champion or to play it yourself. So was this something where when you saw this feature, did that help get you into Quake Champions? So
Quake Champions got released, what was it, April, the closed beta?
Yes.
And I saw a video in March or February. I was never even aware of Quake Champions, man. I was completely disconnected from the pro scene. I had a full-time job in Amsterdam. I barely played games, man. I had no time for any of this nonsense. The full-time job, girlfriend, no time for this stuff anymore. So then I hear about Quake Champions, and I see a video of 04 playing Anarchy on DM6, which is like the very first video released. Yeah. And I was like, dude, cool, the new Quake, and it has CPMA movement. I gotta try it. I really have to try it. And then the beta was released, and I think it was weekends only, and I played with like some other top pros, like Noctis, Sturmy, Toxic, and all those Faz, all those guys. Too good. And from day one, or from minute one, I played Anarchy. Duh. I mean, why would I not play Anarchy? It's really my cup of tea. So I played Anarchy from the start, and the reason why I started playing Quake Champions was, yes, Anarchy was in, but I also heard rumors that there was going to be a big event this year. Yeah. So I figured, no one told me how much, but I knew there was a lot of money in this event. So I figured, might be $100,000 Quake tournament or whatever, which was, for Quake standard, that's huge. Like QuakeCon had to do with like 20K, if that, maybe 10K dual tournaments for years. So QuakeCon money was tiny. This year's QuakeCon was going to be huge. So I thought, 100K, 200K tournament at most, and split between, team and duel. So I started playing Quake Champions here and there every weekend, trying to combine it with work and social life, and played Anarchy and Zorlag, and which were like CPMA or Quake World Champions. But yeah, the cool thing about Quake Champions is that it has so many different movement styles. Every champion is fairly unique in its own right. That you can. So for me, having played every single Quake 2, I've played Quake World, Quake 3, CPMA. I've played some Quake 4, so I'm not a total stranger to strafe jump or crouch sliding.
Yes.
I've played Painkiller. I've even played World Tournament. So I have a very broad set of movement skills, and movement is one of my defining features as a player.
Sure.
So, Quake Champions being the game that it is, having all these different types of champions with a diverse set of movement skills is really, I would say, right up my alley in terms of diversity.
So when I said earlier that, you know, a lot of the dominant champions in different versions of Quake didn't switch to the next one, or didn't kind of like start from zero and grind all the way up and put in max hours. One caveat I will give, which is an absolutely fair reason if any of these guys said it, is obviously for the last, let's say for the last 10 years, a lot of the duel games have been pretty limited prize money. Like, listen, it was still cool for one person if you won. You know, 8,000-9,000 for one person is not bad, but that's only first place, you know. If the guy who comes third is getting 2,000, 3,000, you know, you can already see that it's not as motivating as the days when it might be 10,000, 20,000, whatever for these figures. So when we heard that this Quake World Championship, first place is 100,000, and again, this wasn't just a top heavy. They had a whole bunch of prize money, went all the way down, right? Mm-hmm. Did you go super ham in terms of practice for this tournament? Did you really push yourself to be in top shape?
So when the day it was announced there was $1 million QuakeCon, it was on a Monday right after I came home from vacation, and I woke up and I was like, holy shit, $1 million? I thought it was be like 200K. Oh, it's 300K. But $1 million at that point, I that same day, I talked to my boss. I said, dude, this is a chance I cannot miss, man. He knew about my gaming past, but he you know, I was 30 plus, so he figured, you know, that was way past me.
Sure.
I told him, mate, I want to try this. I want to compete at the World Tour, at QuakeCon. And he said, yeah, sure, do it. So I did. I tried it. I tried playing Quake Champions for a week a lot, and I realized, man, I cannot combine a full-time job and getting good at Quake Champions and having a girlfriend and a social life. I just had no time. I would work from 9 to 6, come home at 7. Start playing at 7 to 11, sacrifice with a team or maybe get in duel here or there. I just couldn't do it. There's no time. I'm an adult, man. I'm 32 years old. There's no way I can play that many games. So a week or two later, I told him, man, I something's got to drop. It's either my social life, family life, work, or Quake, and it's going to be work. So I almost quit my job, and then he said, how about you work part-time? And I started thinking about that. I said, hey, yeah, I can work part-time. I can work 20 hours a week. I can work 30 hours one week and 10 hours the next. Sure. So basically cut my salary in half, and I work 20 hours a week instead of 40 hours ever since July 1st. And so back to your question, if I went ham on the game, since July, I basically, I didn't play 8 hours a day, but I tried getting like 2 to 4 hours a day. And yeah, I practiced a lot for QuakeCon, really. I really thought a new game, Anarchy, I had a lot of fun playing Anarchy at the time, and Zorlak. I played Zorlak and Anarchy since day one. Like,
okay. You weren't just the person who switched like some of the people did when Zorlak got very strong.
No, I played Zorlak literally since day one on ZT on Blood Run because he's really that she is really that good there, and Anarchy is just because so Quake 3 players started out with Ranger, Visor, and Nyx.
Yes, and
they would not adapt, man. Gilson, no offense to Gilson, he was terrible at the game back then because he just kept in this Quake 3 mindset. Quake Live mindset. He just could not adapt to this new game. And now he's a really, really good player. One of the best, clearly, since he won a tournament last week. But in the beginning, he just wasn't good at all. Sparty, another example, he just had this Quake Live mindset where they could just not adapt to a new kind of game. Me, on the other hand, I have played so many different types of games, deathmatch games, where I had all this vast, broad set of movement skills that I could apply. So I picked up the game fairly fast, and I was playing with these top players in Sacrifice and Duel, and we had this closed Discord channel. We'd play 10 of us. We'd play Sacrifice like every night almost, and Duel a lot too. So, yeah, I mean, from July on, I started playing this game quite a bit, and everyone else started out with their own champions that they thought they were going to play, Quake 3 champions. But then, so the game is so fairly new. So whatever we talk about right now can change in a week. That's a thing. That's a thing.
From tournament to tournament.
Yeah, really, because I think before the regional qualifiers, which was like the online, there were 4 online qualifiers for the QuakeCon regionals. I played in the first one, and I was unseeded. And Faz, he played some online tournament before he got first or second. So Faz was seeded 3rd, and I had to play Faz in a 3rd round. But anyway, like 2 days before that first online tournament, they had a patch where they buffed Clutch. Clutch was useless before, quite useless, and they buffed him. And I played him a bit, and he had this dash, just like UT. You could dash across the map. You could you double tap forward, and you dash forward. And he was super good, man. He was really, really powerful. And before an event, it was an online tournament, but it was a lot at stake at this online tournament. It was a qualifier for a big event. It was a qualifier for a qualifier, so it was quite a big event. They suddenly made this one champion super powerful, and people started playing him. And I actually played him. I started playing him in 2 because I saw Agent playing him, and Agent was really good at him. And I figured, this champion has its advantages. So I started playing this champion, and I think for this event, I played some Zorlike Anarchy. Always number 1 and 2. I always played them, and then 3rd champion was whatever was powerful at the time, which was Clutch or Nyx. So yeah, this first event, I really had this. I played Faz in this event in the 3rd round, and it was streamed on Twitch, and I was really amazed at. So I was away from the competitive scene for years, right? And I was really amazed at the production quality of this online tournament. You had these 2 casters in this studio somewhere in England, I think, and the production quality was really great. I thought, I at that moment I realized, man, I think they're going to do something special at QuakeCon. So I had 4,000 viewers for a match against Faz, and I beat him 2-1. And man, that rush I felt playing in front of a big stage and beating him was something I have not felt in years. Like something clicked, and it was amazing playing this match with 4,000 viewers, and beating Faz, who was really one of the best Quake Champions player at the time. The game was still really new, but I was expected to lose. He was the 3rd seed, and I beat him 2-1. It was a tough match, but I beat him, and then man, the rush I felt was amazing. It was a lost feeling, something I hadn't experienced in years. And at that point, I realized, man, I'm gonna go ballistic on Quake Champions. And it was funny. After that match, I had a huge adrenaline dump, and I played against some no-name guy called Quakey. He's like he got a 40.
Story's going in.
No. He's a 40-year-old Quake player from Sweden, I think. And I asked Faz, who is this guy? He said, yeah, he's alright. He's quite good. I lost Blood Run, which is my favorite map. I lost 3-0. I was like, you gotta be shitting me. I'm beating Faz in front of this huge crowd. Then I play off stream against some random no-name, and I lose. Luckily for me, I won map 2 and 3, and I won that match, and I made it to top 8 and qualified for regionals. But yeah, that was quite funny that I beat Faz, adrenaline dump, and I almost lose. But yeah, that event was sealed the deal for me. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go ham or as ham as possible on Quake Champions.
Okay, so at the World Championship itself, you have a very unique perspective on this tournament, because obviously Claus doesn't have a big name. I mean, for a start off, if I asked people before this tournament, name me a Quake player from Belarus, obviously his name would never come up. There's only one that anyone even remembers, except if they're a very, very old school player. So you not only got to play him in the final, but you played him in your group as well.
Yeah.
When you played him in the group, could you tell that he was a strong player?
Yeah, I thought
like a hint of what might have come.
He was at the regionals as well, and he was really good at Sacrifice. I knew he was a slash player in Sacrifice, but as a dual player, he basically went off the radar. He was a good player. He was like Zran or none of these players who were good, but they didn't have a big name. Yes. So he qualified, sure, but he was a top seed. He was in my group, and I won my first 2 matches, and he won his first 2 matches. So we both knew that we had already qualified, so there was nothing really at stake. The winner of that match would play Galasek, and the loser of that match would play Killzone. So I guess that was at stake, side of the bracket. But in general, I played him that first match. I beat him on one map 3-0. and then suddenly he flips a switch, and I realize that holy shit, this kid's got a lightning gun accuracy that I've never felt before. Like, he could not miss. His aim was something I've never ever experienced in Quake Champions at all. Like, he just destroyed me with the lightning gun, and I felt like there was nothing I could do. So yes, there was definitely hints that he was a strong competitor because his aim. And I told Galasak, who was my friend. So what was cool about QuakeCon was that Sturmy was there, Galasak was there, I was there. We were friends 12 years ago in the World Tour, and then we meet again in 2017, still playing video games. Yes, many things have changed since then. You know, we're all adults, we're all 30-year-olds, but we still have a love for video games, which I think is quite unique in this story. Is that we've all played across different eras of pro gaming. Sure. Anyhow, I told Galasak, man, you got to watch out for his LG. His LG is off the charts, man. It's really good. And then Galasak played him, and he gets destroyed like 3-1, 3-0 or something like that because the claws, at that tournament, he was just unbeatable. He was really, really good.
Okay. And so when you met him in the final, though, like, did you actually have like a game plan? Did you think there was like an approach where you were going to be able to win? Did you come in with confidence?
So first thing first, I was not even supposed to play QuakeCon Duel. I didn't even qualify for it. I was a backup player. I lost in the qualifiers to Kilson and to Cooler. Then I lost in the backup tournament to Toxic. So all three names, they were really, really big Quake names. So there's no shame in losing to them. But I wasn't even supposed to play in it. So then Cypher dropped out and Agent dropped out due to visa issues. So I was like, my goal for this tournament was top 16. If I make top 16, $10,000, man, I'd be more than happy. So then I'm top 16. I beat Kilson. I'm like, all right, that's cool. I beat Kilson. Now I'm top 8. Avec, I had play Avec on stage. I beat Avec. I'm still top 4. De Hang, I was super confident against him. I beat him 2-0. So I'm in the final of QuakeCon, man. Like, this was basically just like where in Painkiller at the end of the year, if I thought about the previous year, it was like this is more than I could have ever dreamed of. Like, QuakeCon was the same. It's top 2, being in a grand final, not even qualified. It was more than I could ever dream of. So I think in hindsight, maybe I went in with the wrong mindset in the final because I knew like, oh, man, I wasn't even supposed to be here. Like, even winning a map would be cool. I made 50,000. Whatever. I wasn't super confident going into that match because he beat me in the group stage, and he beat Cooler. He just won the sacrifice tournament before our match, so he was warm up. He was hyped. He just won a 75k, beating legends in Quake, Toxic, yes, Noctis, Sturmy, and Fast. So then he played me in the final, and he was just he was on fire, man. So I watched that match back once or twice. I should have played very differently, much slower. Try to keep my distance because his LG was off the chart. He was just LGing out of his ass. Really, it was super good. Later, it came out that the game at the time had a feature where if you had your opponent model and if you flick your mouse across your model, you would basically the LG was a beam. So so move your mouse left to right, and regardless of if you're actually hitting him or missing him, like you could basically spin circles 360 and you would have 100% LG accuracy.
It's like an auto aim effect.
Sorry?
Was it like kind of an auto aim effect?
Not really
close to it. It made it go on or something.
Not really auto aim, but it was like you could not miss if you're. I think the way it was if your crosshair was on your opponent.
Yes. In
between time 1 and time 2, and if your crosshair was on the opponent in between the time it took for your lightning gun to reload,
yes,
then it counts as a hit. So if you're Klaus is a very high sensitivity player and a high XL too, I think. So the way he aims is he always does micro adjustments to the player model. So he's always like this and this. So the way the game worked at the time was that his LG was like 40+% on my small character model, which was unheard of. Like everyone was unprepared for this type of aim, and the way the LG worked at the time was also basically he was given God's gift by having an aiming style that really suited the game at the time.
Yes.
So no one knew about this bug or feature before the tournament. I knew something was up with the LG. I really did, but no one knew really how broken it really was until you played Claus. And after I played Claus, man, I was devastated losing that match. But I realized, man, I got second in a Quake tournament, like more than I could have ever dreamed of. I was always the top 12 player in Quake Live, Quake 3. And then getting second at the biggest, because in reality, it really is the biggest Quake tournament the game has ever seen. Sure, the game might not be perfect, but in terms of production quality, prize money, it really is the biggest Quake tournament ever. So for me to get second there is such a huge achievement for me. So yeah, I'm really proud of getting second there. But after that match, I talked to 04 and I said, man, this lightning gun, there's something wrong with it, because you don't know what it's like, man, playing Claus. Like, and as soon as he just runs at you with an LG and he cannot miss, it was scary. Yeah. It was scary playing him.
So, okay, after that, you started on the circuit and you went to DreamHack Denver, where you were upset and you went out in the group stage. You lost to the unknown Dewey, and then obviously you had Toxic there as well. What happened at this tournament? And can you also give me the context? Because I know, relating to what you've just been talking about, this is where patch changes started to change the competitive output. So what was the context to this tournament? Yeah,
so like you say about patches, before QuakeCon there was a patch, but it didn't really change the balance at all. So that was fine. Before the regionals there was a patch which basically made Clutch pointless to play, because before the QuakeCon regionals, they buffed the LG. Suddenly the LG became super powerful because of this boom 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 mechanic, and so Clutch became useless, and everyone was playing Clutch at that event. So that QuakeCon regionals was kind of weird because the balance changed completely one day before an event. QuakeCon was fine because everyone knew about the balance. Sure, the game had some broken champions like Zorlak, their spit was broken or whatever. And then you had Denver, which 1 day before the event, 2 days before the event, they made another patch which fixed the LG, so you couldn't abuse the LG anymore. So instead of destroying everyone with LG, the LG right now was a tickle weapon. You could literally tickle someone to death, and it took like 10 seconds for you to die. LG was made from like completely insanely overpowered to practically useless except against like 3 or 4 champions. This happened 2 days before an event. I had like maybe 2 hours of games in before I had to fly out to Denver on Thursday. The event was just shit for me, mate. It was just awful. I mentioned jet lag before, how I was jet lagged at DreamHack Winter. So now I was jet lagged at DreamHack Denver. I woke up 11:30 at night, and I played my match against Dewey at 8 p.m. the next day. So I was up for 20 hours. My eyes were bloodshot red. I was super tired. I just played a really, really poor event. Even though Toxic beat me 2-1, he destroyed me on map 2 and 3 on his Slash. He really beat me easily. I felt slower that event for some reason. My mind was not there. Shitty. Like I said earlier, also I said some events click and some events like do the opposite of click, which was Denver for me. It was a shitty event. Dewey, he played Clutch, which I hadn't played against Clutch in weeks, because suddenly Clutch was good again, because the LG got nerfed, and Clutch was, from completely useless, he was decent. He's right now he's decent. Clutch's balance is fairly fair. So at this event, Dewey played Clutch, and I did not know how to beat Clutch because I hadn't played against Clutch in months or weeks. So I was one. So the thing about Quake Champions is that since the frag limit is so low, and since some champion stacks are so low, tiny little things can make a huge difference. Against Skills and at QuakeCon, I was really close to it getting tied and us going into sudden death. Against Avec, also some really close moments where I escaped with like 5 health and managed to win the round. Against the Hang as well. So against Dewey, I was up 1 map to 0 and 2-1 in rounds. So I was 1 round away from winning my group and making top 8, and then my tournament would have been fairly successful. So these tiny little things can be a huge difference. Cypher at Italy lost in the group stage, but he was 1 round away from winning the group as well. So, or at least second or whatever. So these tiny little things in Quake Champions, because the game is the way it is that the variance is quite high, and that tiny little things matter that much. So Denver in general, top 16, very shitty tournament, very disappointed by the result, and I started thinking, man, maybe QuakeCon was just a fluke. Maybe I'm just not that good at Quake, and this was just luck. And I
after one tournament,
man, that's the thing.
It hits you that hard.
It devastates me, man. I hate losing. I feel like if I really put my heart and soul into it, and I'm trying to do that in Quake Champions, I just cannot stand losing. I just really want to win, and which is also a burden because before QuakeCon, I dreamt Quake. If I was not playing Quake, I was some stream watching Quake or watching some VOD of some tournament or whatever. I was just literally Quake all the time. After QuakeCon, I chilled down a bit. I started working more at my job and just relaxed a bit more. But yeah, I hate losing.
So if that event made you question yourself, then the ESL Italy event must have been the perfect pick-me-up. Because in this one, as you say, you had this crazy tiebreaker situation in the group stage. Then you had to play Claws, and you lost this really tough game. So you had to go all the way through the lower bracket, right? I know from the history of any game which has a lower bracket, when people make a run through that, it does, like, you feel like you've come back to life. You know, you could be out of the tournament super early, and then the confidence obviously goes ridiculous, and you got to beat Claws again. So there's this whole revenge narrative, right? First things first. Did this tournament, now that you've played 3 tournaments and you've had 2 that were very good, okay, assuming the next one doesn't completely cripple your confidence again, you're all in on Quake Champions now, right? You know you can be a good player. You're going to play it a lot, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely. I work part-time still, 20 hours a week, and I play a lot of Quake Champions, so I really, really want to do well for this year. And what's in store for next year, I don't know. But yeah, I'm definitely all in for this year.
So tell me then, since you got like the 2 chances to play Claws again, you played him in the like the best of 5 or whatever it was, and then you played him in the low bracket as well. So he won, you won, close matches throughout. What would you say about playing him at a different tournament where now you know what he's like as a player? They've had patch changes. What were these matches like?
Yes, patch changes. That's a key word here. So he definitely is not as good anymore as he was at QuakeCon because the LG is just that much weaker. So I think he beat Cooler and he lost to Kilson, and then I played him, and so funny story is that both groups had 3-way ties. Our groups, I had 1 more map win than Cypher, so I got through and Cypher was knocked out. Claws, on the other hand, they were all tied in that group. Like they had to replay off stream, and in the end, it was Claws against Cooler, and everyone left the event because it was like 9 p.m. Claws beat him 2-1, and then Claws and Cooler were arguing about this extra matches because Claws and Kilson thought they had qualified and Cooler didn't, and it was quite some drama at the event that not many players know about or people know about outside of the event. But it was quite some drama at the event. I was really hoping, because I knew I had won my group, I was really hoping that Claus would get second, so I got to play him. Yeah. Because I wanted my revenge, right? So knowing that he got second and having to play him on stage was just what I wanted. So getting into that match, I knew I had some good chances of beating him because I just felt fairly good for this event. Even though my practice for this tournament was quite low because I had some issues at home, working a lot. So it was a minor event. It was invite only. Prize money is fairly low, Quake Live standards, so sure. Nothing to go ham about. But yeah, sure, I played an hour here or there, but I definitely didn't play as much as before QuakeCon. But playing Claus was back and forth. It was 1-0 for him, 1-1, 2-1 for him, 2-2. So we were back and forth, and the fifth map was so Quake Champions has 4 maps right now in Duel. In the best of 5 match, that's quite shitty because your 5th map is always going to be a repeat of one of the first 4 maps, right? Sure. So the 5th map was his favorite map, Corrupted Keep, and he beat me 3-1 on it. But losing that match, I was again devastated. Even though it was a minor event, small money, still I really want to win every single match. But I knew that I did put up a good show. I also felt like I redeemed my QuakeCon loss where he beat me 3-0. Now I lost 3-2. I thought it was a good match. I was happy about my performance against him. It was close, back and forth against Klaus, the QuakeCon champion. So surely I put up a good show. So I was happy about that match.
Okay, and what about when you were actually able to beat him in the lower bracket then?
So yeah, I played Avik after off stream. I beat him 2-0, and then I felt that against Klaus, I did feel that I was the better player in the first match. Even though I lost 3-2, I did feel that one map got away from me. Then we played our lower bracket final, which was best of 3. He beat me on my favorite map, Blood Run. I was leading 2-0. He comes back 2-0 and he beats me. So I basically give up at 2 map point lead. That does something to you. When you're up 2-0 and you lose 2-3, you might start thinking, man, what if I just had won that one round? I would have been a map up, right? It's just like tennis, where I might refer to tennis quite a bit because I'm a tennis player as well. I watch a lot of tennis. If you have break point and you lose that point and suddenly your opponent wins the game and then he wins the next game, and you're like, oh man, if I had won that point, the game would have been totally different.
Sure.
Quake Champions, with the round-based duel the way it is, the same might happen because that's just the nature of round-based play. If this little thing happened differently, then your snowball effect would have been different. So I lost the first map 3-2. Then the next map, I'm up 2-0. And it's his map, it's Corrupted Keep. And again, it's 2-0. I'm like, oh man, not again. This is not happening again, man. I really should win this map. So I win round number 5, and I win 3-2 on his map pick. So this is the first time I beat him on Corrupted Keep. Then the third map was not my favorite. I think it was Ruins of Sarnath, yeah. But I don't think he likes the map either. So it was a decent pick for me. So it was a decent, it was a flip of the coin, and it got Ruins of Sarnath, and I was up 2-0 again, and then he beats me. It's 2-1. So I'm like, not again, man. You're not going to give up a two point lead again. Then I beat him in that fourth round, and I win the match 2-1, which was finally I beat Klaus. After 3 times losing to him, I beat him the 4th time. So yeah, you know what they say: nobody beats Fu 4 times in a row.
Okay.
So that happened. But yeah, that was I'm happy about beating him, playing well against him, and he's a good player, but he's definitely not as good as he was at QuakeCon.
So as you referred to before, early on in Quake Champions, Kilson was one of the players where he obviously has legacy value in his name, but he wasn't one of the top players. So what changed in Kilson, the player you met in the final of this tournament?
He has been grinding the game a lot, and he plays a lot, and he plays the way he plays the game. He's got great aim. His favorite champion is Nyx, which I think Nyx is the most overpowered champion in the game. People always complain about Anarchy and how Anarchy is broken and overpowered and too fast and blah blah blah. And suddenly everyone is playing Anarchy right now, which is true. A lot of people are playing Anarchy right now. I've been playing Anarchy because it's CPM, man. That's why I'm playing Anarchy. But Nyx is a character that can go invisible.
Yes. In
a duel game. It's like there is no ability greater than invisibility in a duel game. It's literally a get out of jail free card, and 20 seconds later you can have the ability again if you run the map well. The character is so overpowered, and Kilson is really good at Nyx, that his style of play, he's very good at keeping distance and railing you from afar, and doing that over and over again. And the game clicked for him right before QuakeCon, where he maybe even at the QuakeCon regionals, the game clicked for him. He became really good suddenly. Like when I said he wasn't very good at the beginning, it was like the first 6 to 8 weeks. Sure. At the regionals, he was already really, really good. I lost him at the regionals actually. So he has been playing very well for the last 2 weeks before Italy, and then Italy was just his event. Everything clicked. He was hitting some insane air rockets, some insane rails. Everything was on point. His control was good. His positioning was good. He just played a really, really good event. So his Nyx and his Doom were very, very good. And Doom at the time was also a bit broken. His hitbox wasn't as big as... His hitbox was a bit broken, so everyone played Doom. Everyone played Nyx, basically. And Nyx has always been a good player, a good champion. And he plays Nyx very, very well. So, yeah, Kilson right now is probably the player to beat. And I don't think there's any patch changes coming for DreamHack Winter in 3 weeks. So we'll see how that event unfolds, man. But yeah, Kilson and his Knicks on that tournament were on fire.
Sure. So as obviously in the context we've set up, like definitely these patch changes can have a big effect on who does well and who's favored and who it's going to be harder for. So I'll add that caveat in now. But I want to ask you this. Since it's early in Quake Champions, Bonnet has this unique dynamic where, you know, depending on what champions you're strong on and which weapons and your style of play, you know, we can see ways in which certain players could become better or worse. When I ask you this, if you had to predict, just based on your analysis of the game so far, playing these people, watching these people, will the big names, you know, the Coolers, the Cyphers, the Raffas of the world, you know, the transcendent players from the history of Quake, will they get it together and, you know, whether it's next month or 6 months from now, become the top players? Or do you think this is a different enough game that it will be the Claws, the Razy, whoever, you know, these less well-known names who just happen to be better at Quake Champions? What's your sense for it?
I think the game is still fairly, obviously the game is still fairly new, but I think it might still be too new for me to predict on how the game is going to evolve. Also, the way the game dual mode works right now, there's a lot of, some people call it randomness. I'd like to call it variance, where small stacks, low frag limit, low time limit, so tiny things can change a lot. Refa he lost in a very close match to Dehang at QuakeCon. Cypher was nearly through to the winner bracket at Italy. Cooler got third at QuakeCon. Don't forget, it was a very good result for him as well. He didn't pass his group in Italy because he had Kilson and Claus in his group, but it's really hard to predict what the future of the game is going to bring. DreamHack might have a completely different winner. Like Garpy came out of nowhere and won ESWC, right? So granted, there was an event where the big names, I guess, weren't there, but still, Garpy won an event, and he was always a good player. So there's been 4 big events right now, and every tournament has had a different winner. So maybe the way dual mode works right now, it's just that the variance is high enough so that a different player can win an event. It just depends on how well you play that day, and everyone is playing so much, and the top is fairly close to each other that it's not going to be a domination Quake 4 with Toxic or me in Fatality with Painkiller. It's just going to be, you know, this for the next few months where a different player wins a different tournament each time. It could be like that. Also, a single elimination in that sense, I think, produces more erratic results than does double elimination, because you could always have a shitty match where you lose and shit didn't go your way, and you're like, I'm going to get it together and come from the lower bracket, and then you can, like you said earlier, you can get in the zone and you can win an event from the lower bracket. So a single elim I noticed at QuakeCon, this is actually, I think, one of the very few single elim tournaments I've played. I was like, man, I've played like 3 matches in playoffs, and I'm already in the grand final. It felt like back in double elimination days, which used to be more common, I think.
Yes.
Where you had to play a lot more matches in order to get to the grand final. So I think single elim might produce some more erratic results as well. But like I said, man, I don't know what's in store for the next few months. They might change duel. They might experiment with duel a bit after DreamHack Winter, and thus produce a more consistent Quake, so to say. I'm not sure.
Okay. Being all that as it may, and all the context and the caveats and the asterisks, Vu becomes the #1 player in Quake Champions. Can it happen?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've played 2 grand finals so far of some pretty big events. So. It's more than I dreamt of when I started playing Quake Champions a few months ago. It's also
So what's the significance of that to you then? Because as we've mentioned, except for the Painkiller days and then a bit of CPM before that, you know, you've always been in and out. You've played a bit, and then the game's never really suited you, and everything. It hasn't never been the perfect storm. You know, it's never been the right game at the right time in your life with the right context to be an esports pro again. Has the fact that you've had all this time off and you've come back and you're an older guy now and you're kind of getting a second crack at it, is it significant to you? Is it different than was in the past?
Oh yeah, man. Like I said, getting second at QuakeCon was such I'm not going to say life-changing event or life-altering event money based. It's just that Quake was never really. I was never really a top Quake player. I was good, but I was never at the top. And then suddenly you get second at QuakeCon, which was, like I said, for me, the biggest Quake event ever, if not one of the biggest event ever. So that's, to me, it means a lot to get second when all these big names, Cooler, Rafa, Dehang, Toxic, all these big Quake players, and I managed to place above them. I'm like I said earlier, I'm really proud of that achievement, and doing so well in Quake Champions so far. Like even second in Italy, even though it was a smaller event, is still really, really proud of that achievement. But it's definitely left me wanting more. Like I've been to 2 grand finals, and in both grand finals I didn't win a single map. I think every grand final in Quake Champions so far has been a blowout. It's always been like 2-0 or 3-0. It's never been a close match in a grand final. But yeah, anyway, I would really love to make another grand final and actually win an event. I've not felt what it was like to win an event. And I remember from Painkiller days, winning an event is just like the best feeling.
Okay. At the end of the interview, do you have a final message to leave people with, or someone you want to thank or say hello to?
No, not really. I guess... well, yes, I'd like to thank id Software, I guess, for supporting the game, bringing Quake Champions, Quake back to the masses. The game is still in early access, so it could do a lot. There's still some things to fix, and I think if they keep pouring their heart and soul into it, the game can become big. I really hope for 2018 for the game to become like a big esports game where it has like many players and many viewers. So yeah, kudos to id Software. Thank you for doing these reflections with XYZ player. I think they're really cool. And yeah, that's it.
Dankjewel.
Ja, geen dank.